The luxurious villa was submerged in the hazy blue hue of the night, enveloped by a melancholic and tranquil atmosphere. Bare feet walked silently on the cold floor, every step carrying the caution and fear of a freeloader. The girl bowed her head slightly, her trembling hand touching her chest, as if trying to suppress the anxiety surging in her heart. Her fingers reached out and then paused in midair before the tightly closed door, expressing a fiercely intense inner struggle. In that moment, she bitterly realized that self-respect right now was a luxury she had no right to hold on to. Her hand knocked lightly on the wooden door, silently telling herself that she must try to endure a little more to overcome this adversity. Standing alone before the massive door of fate, she silently affirmed that survival was now her most important goal. As the door gradually opened, she looked inside with a complex gaze and inwardly lamented that the harshness of growing up was truly too cruel. A deeply masculine man appeared, making her, though shattered inside, have to brace herself to play the role of someone calm. Facing his cold gaze, she was determined to fight with all her might to survive in this world full of hardships. The man stood towering before the door with a muscular physique, his arms crossed over his chest like a barricade separating her from the world inside. His sharp and highly skeptical eyes drilled deep into her mind, making the already tense atmosphere even more suffocating. Suddenly, he spoke up to ask about her mother's condition, leaving the girl stunned by this unforeseen concern. Despite a fleeting moment of wavering, she told herself not to let his kindness weaken her resolve, as she knew she had to use him one more time. He indifferently informed her that she was fine now, having just been discharged from the hospital this afternoon to return to Brooklyn. After providing the information, he leaned slightly to signal an invitation for her to step inside to continue their unfinished conversation. As soon as she entered the room, he coldly brought up her previous declaration of severing ties, mocking how she once swore to never see his face again. Fingering the bottle cap with full impatience, he pressed her to explain the real reason behind this abrupt appearance. The girl lowered her head, her lips murmuring words choked in her throat, trying to muster all her courage to face the cruel reality. Her hands tightly gripped the hem of her shirt in extreme trembling, and she finally gave up her pride to beg that she was in desperate need of money. He quietly drank water, leaving a pressure-filled silence hanging over the room that made the girl even more flustered. Then, he coldly asked how much she really needed, a direct question as if wanting to strip bare her desperation. The figure of $100,000 was blurted out, causing the atmosphere to instantly freeze due to its heaviness. His hand crushed the water bottle in a fit of rage, asking in a gruff voice what her true purpose was in requesting such a large amount of money. The girl bowed her head in full resignation, trembling as she said that she desperately needed it and hoped he would help as soon as possible. He demanded a satisfactory reason, but she firmly asserted that she had no intention of borrowing from him. Her audacity in asking him to just give her the money left the man astonished at this sudden change. She admitted that she would never have the ability to pay it back, making him even more curious about her next move. In her despair, she proposed that instead of paying with money, she would give him anything he desired. He let out a mocking laugh at her naivety, sarcastically asking if she truly understood what it was that he craved. He stared piercingly into her eyes and firmly asserted that he knew all too well she wanted to get into bed with him. The girl replied that kisses were no longer enough to satisfy him, so she volunteered to be a substitute for all 4 years of college. The man froze with a change in his expression, gritting his teeth as he asked if she truly understood what she was saying. He took heavy steps closing in on her, creating a suffocating pressure that enveloped the entire space. His hand roughly lifted her chin, gruffly questioning whether she realized the gravity of that offer. His eyes were filled with contempt when he asked if $100,000 had been her ultimate price all along. He bitterly mocked that if money was all it took to buy her, she should have said so right from the very beginning. He resentfully realized he had been too foolish in devoting his sincere feelings to pursue and desire someone like her. His fury and disappointment reached their peak, causing him to decisively turn his back, severing all last hopes. The sound of a pen setting down on paper echoed coldly as he decided to sign a check to end this humiliating transaction. He held the check in his hand, coldly calling out the name Jiyu Parker and mocking that she had just sold herself cheap for $100,000. She quietly took the banknote, trying to reassure herself that this was merely a fair transaction, so there was no reason to feel humiliated. His eyes darkened with possessiveness, ruthlessly ordering her to take off all her clothes immediately. The girl was stunned by that abrupt demand, stammering to ask him if she had to do it right now and right in this place. The man indifferently reminded her that she had taken the money, and the agreement was that he had the right to demand it whenever he wanted for the next 4 years. He sat leaning back against the bed with a defiant look, coldly asking what she was still hesitating and waiting for instead of taking action. The girl slightly bowed her head, a sense of panic rising inside her as she silently wondered if he had ever looked at her with such eyes before. Giving herself the answer that he never had, she began to tremblingly shed her outer layer of clothing like an unconditional surrender to the harshness of reality. As the layers of clothes fell onto the cold floor, she tried to brush away all thoughts and told herself this was the only way she could repay him right now. Standing bare before the other's gaze, she bitterly realized that even the feeling of shame had now become an extremely extravagant luxury for her. The man ground his teeth slightly, his jaw clenching with a dangerous look like a predator preparing to pounce on its target. His hand roughly grabbed the girl's arm, putting all his strength into a pull that left her with no way of retreat. He pinned her down on the bed, using his body weight to lock down every feeble resistance of the trembling girl. In a panic, she faintly whispered, asking him to wait a moment, but his eyes were now overflowing with possessive lust. Ignoring her pleas, he roughly claimed her lips with a passionate kiss, swallowing every sound she was about to make. That intense kiss made her bitterly realize that her mother's past teachings about safety were now completely meaningless. The passionate physical collision made their breaths intertwine, the room suddenly heating up due to the naked touches. She could only moan in helplessness as she felt wave after wave of intense emotions ceaselessly crashing in and invading her mind. Even though she faintly gasped that she couldn't breathe, he did not let her go but continued to delve into this cruel game. He smirked slightly and whispered into her ear that even the most introverted people would eventually become bolder as they grew up. He ground his teeth to restrain himself, his jaw clenching with a dangerous look as he watched the girl trembling beneath him. His hand roughly gripped her wrist, stripping away the last resistance of someone desperately trying to escape in vain. He pinned her down on the bed in a panic, leaving her only able to let out cries choked in her throat. Although she startledly begged him to wait a moment, his eyes blazing with the fire of lust showed an unshakable resolve. He roughly claimed her lips with a passionate kiss, completely swallowing the sound of his name being called in astonishment. In a trance mixed with bitterness, she resentfully realized that her mother's admonitions about safety had been completely meaningless. The passionate physical collision between the two bodies was like fanning the flames of desire, sweeping them both into an inescapable vortex. She could only let out agonizing moans as she felt the pressure from his muscular body constantly pressing down on her. As her breathing gradually became choked, he gruffly reproached her, saying that she was the one who had turned him into a bastard. Closing her eyes tightly in brokenness, she silently wondered if these feelings were truly love, then how much more cruel would that pain be? In the quiet room, little Jiyu was engrossed in sketching an image of a small monster with a mischievous and innocent expression. Suddenly, a loud shout rang out, making Jiyu startle and drop her book. The little girl looked up in a daze with eyes full of anxiety. Her mother's face appeared full of annoyance as she harshly asked if the little girl had actually heard what her mother just told her. Casually tossing a pile of clothes onto the bed, she ordered her daughter that she absolutely must find a way to get close to young Master Hunter. She incessantly recounted the efforts she had put in since last semester just to arrange a joint outing for both children. The mother's hands suddenly reached out, making Jiyu shudder. The little girl could only stand still and endure her cold imposition. She roughly lifted Jiyu's chin and loudly lectured that when others are talking, she absolutely must not look away, but must look straight and smile. She continued to scold that if she kept that sullen expression, she would look extremely gloomy, something that Americans inherently hated. Trying to force a radiant but completely fake smile, the mother demanded her daughter immediately practice smiling exactly like her. Little Jiyu quietly shrank behind her book, silently praying she could escape this suffocating control of her mother. Little Jiyu forced a radiant smile exactly as her mother wanted, even though her eyes still held a melancholic look. The mother clearly showed her satisfaction upon seeing the dimples appear, praising that the little girl looked the most beautiful when she smiled. While trying a gorgeous dress on her daughter, she talked endlessly about Hunter's glamorous family background, as their families spent the whole summer vacationing across Europe. She told her daughter to brace herself because they would soon return to New York in September after a string of extremely luxurious days. Her hands skillfully tied a white bow, not forgetting to boast that this meeting was the result of her painstaking efforts to approach his mother in the lobby. She knelt down, looked straight into her child's eyes, and confessed that she felt happiest right before letting her child go out with rich friends. She instructed her child to fully utilize the time to win Hunter's favor, making Jiyu naively ask back if her mother wanted her to eat the young master. Looking at the drawing of two children holding hands, the mother hastily corrected that she only wanted her child to become his closest friend. She coldly turned and walked away, affirming that all these calculations were for Jiyu's future, and that the little girl should feel lucky for that. Her eyes revealed a sharp and calculating look as she lightly smoothed her hair, silently preparing for the next moves in her daughter's life. The woman smiled in front of the mirror, silently proud of her journey from a poor person to becoming a resident of the luxurious Upper East Side. She was both getting her daughter ready and excitedly talking about the upper class's rule of wearing white dresses in the Hamptons as a symbol of wealth. Jiyu listened in silence. The little girl realized that the ambition for wealth had permeated every single one of her mother's daily teachings. Once a model on the runway, she always strove to copy the dazzling styles of the most aristocratic people to assert her status. But she could not realize that expensive outfits alone would never buy a solid position in the true upper echelon. She also missed the subtle unspoken rules of the aristocracy, where wearing white after Labor Day was considered a foolish mistake. Her hands gently placed a pink bow on Jiyu's hair, a caring action but one filled with expectations of a brighter future. The mother hurriedly led her daughter away, constantly reminding the little girl that she must always maintain the most perfect appearance in front of rich people. Standing before the threshold of the aristocratic penthouse, Jiyu was bewildered knowing she was about to have a fateful meeting with the heir of the Hamilton family. Holding her mother's hand tightly, the little girl naively only hoped that young Master Hunter's house would have a lot of books to read, unable to understand her mother's frantic obsession. Little Jiyu secretly thought that if a rich person's house was overflowing with books, being friends with him wouldn't be so bad, while her mother was extremely excited to step into the elevator reserved exclusively for the top floor for the first time. The woman eagerly pressed the button-marked penthouse with a fierce hope of a life-changing future waiting ahead. However, the suspicious silence of the device made her start to worry and frantically wonder if the system was malfunctioning. Just then, a security guard appeared and coldly announced that this was an exclusive elevator for penthouse residents only, requesting them to use the common passageway. She hurriedly explained that she was Olivia bringing her daughter Jiyu to a prearranged playdate with the young Master Hunter, hoping to be let through. He still firmly demanded that they step outside to verify their identity through the intercom system, despite the obvious disappointment on the mother's face. As she walked away, she resentfully muttered that the guy only dared to be rude to those on the lower floors and wondered if she was being discriminated against just because she was a renter. The surging resentment made the mother endlessly berate that perhaps the security guard was looking down on Asians with the contemptuous eyes of someone who considered himself superior. The flare-up of anger made her turn back and yell to demand priority, asserting that she was the one who arrived first and refused to be ignored. Finally, she turned to remind Jiyu that she should at least be grateful for having half-white blood in her veins, ignoring the bewilderment on her little daughter's face. The mother gently stroked her daughter's hair and secretly wished Jiyu's hair was a bit blonder, just as the security guard spoke up to ask for their identity. After introducing herself as Olivia Parker, both received a nod allowing them to step up and explore the prestigious top floor. The magnificent space of the penthouse opened up, making the mother unable to hold back her awe. She gasped in amazement at the absolute luxury. She eagerly called her daughter's name to look around, seemingly wanting to pull Jiyu along to immerse in her high society dream. Holding up a $10 bill to compare with a historical painting on the wall, she gleefully asked Jiyu if the person in the painting looked exactly like the figure on the bill. She passionately admired the glorious family heritage, silently affirming that this was the wealthiest place she had ever had the chance to set foot in. Suddenly, The young master's shouting unexpectedly echoed through the hallway, making both mother and daughter jump in terror. The mother quickly regained her fake facade, leaning close to Jiyu's ear to order her to smile brightly because the target was about to appear. Little Jiyu tried to force a distorted and highly awkward smile, while fear clearly showed on her pale face. The little girl spun around in shock when she felt an overwhelming presence behind her, her eyes widening at the unexpected situation. Jiyu shrank back trembling, secretly fearing that some terrifying monster was about to pounce on her from the corner of the hallway. But the one who appeared was the boy Hunter, running and jumping energetically with a tennis ball in his hand. Looking closely at the other's face, Jiyu was shocked to realize this was the biggest and most unruly bully on the playground that she had always dreaded. The young master's deep blue eyes suddenly locked onto Jiyu, expressing a mix of surprise and curiosity. Hunter suddenly shouted loudly, demanding the little girl catch the ball hurtling toward her like a wind-piercing arrow. The fateful throw hit Jiyu straight in the head, causing her first encounter with Hunter Hamilton to end in record time. The boy stood rooted to the spot in shock, his face clearly showing confusion at the accidental incident he had caused. The mother was paralyzed with horror witnessing the scene of her daughter being injured right in this luxurious and prestigious place. Jiyu's consciousness gradually faded into darkness, leaving only the blurred silhouette of a white dress sweeping across her vision. The playdate concluded in chaos as Jiyu suffered a concussion and had to be hospitalized urgently right after collapsing. The prestigious Astor School appeared in the pale sunlight of the first week of September, marking a promising opening day. Jiyu let out a soft cry of pain when ointment was applied to her wound, while her mother comforted her, hoping she would endure it so the scar could heal quickly. She sighed in sheer frustration, complaining that this unfortunate incident had the heart to happen right before the crucial enrollment period. However, her eyes suddenly became deep and calculating, silently telling herself that after all, things weren't entirely useless. The image of Hunter standing beside his elegant mother appeared as proof of the benefits she had strived to harvest. Jiyu and Hunter officially stepped into two different worlds, Astor and Alton, beginning their journey among the upper classes. The two-century-old private academies were only a street apart, creating opportunities for students from both sides to interact frequently. From sports clubs to massive libraries, all luxurious amenities were invested in to mold the social elites. Even cultural festivals or school spirit days were co-organized by the parent associations of both schools in extremely high-class fashion. Thanks to a rich history of training outstanding figures, these two schools had firmly reigned at the pinnacle of the Upper East Side. Jiyu stood lost amidst the noisy crowd, secretly feeling that the first day of school was truly a chaotic mess full of pressure. The mother's hands suddenly gripped the little girl's wrists tightly, an action full of coercion and imposition. She hurriedly urged Jiyu to move faster because Hunter was waiting, ignoring the reluctance clearly visible on the poor child's face. The two families accidentally bumped into each other right on the street, starting with the courteous and social greetings of the upper class. The little girl kept her head down, trying to suppress her pain, telling herself not to cry to avoid unwanted attention from the people around. Hunter's mother stood quietly observing, her sharp eyes as if wanting to see through all of Jiyu's hidden thoughts. She gently reminded her son that he still had something to say to Jiyu, creating an atmosphere full of awkwardness. The young master hesitantly uttered an apology in confusion, his face showing a hint of embarrassment at having to lower himself before the other party. A beautifully ribbon-tied gift box was suddenly presented as a sincere compensation for the mistakes committed earlier. Hunter looked straight into Jiyu's eyes and earnestly begged for forgiveness, hoping this gift could heal the little girl's emotional wounds. Hunter held out a beautifully ribbon-tied book, asserting that this was a sincere apology gift for Jiyu. The little girl was stunned as she accepted the gift, her eyes wide with surprise at the young master's unexpected gesture of reconciliation. Jiyu's mother smiled smugly. She didn't forget to remind her daughter to say thank you upon receiving an item exactly to her liking. Meanwhile, Hunter sulkily complained to his mother that he would rather go to the playground with his friends than have to stay here. Mrs. Hamilton immediately warned her son to behave properly, like a gentleman, unless he wanted to be completely grounded. The boy threw a vicious glare full of hatred at Jiyu, making the poor little girl tremble in fear. The two children walked silently behind the mothers who were engrossed in conversation, carrying heavy, hidden thoughts. Suddenly, Hunter leaned close to her ear and whispered bitterly that he truly despised the name Jiyu Parker. Having said that, he coldly turned his back and walked away, leaving the little girl standing all alone clutching the book with a surging sense of sorrow. Mrs. Hamilton ordered the butler to take the kids down to the playroom below, bringing a close to this highly awkward meeting. Mrs. Hamilton smiled gently, suggesting that Hunter should take Jiyu on a tour of the massive library located right inside his playroom. Through the explanation, the little girl was stunned to realize that his family occupied the top 3 floors of the building with a clear class division. Jiyu hugged her newly received book tightly, taking small steps up the stairs in eager anticipation, secretly looking forward to a world full of stories. The playroom door gently cracked open, revealing a vast space flooded with light and tranquility. Behind the door was a miniature library with thousands of neatly arranged books, far exceeding all the little girl's imagination. Jiyu's eyes lit up with joy. She silently marveled that she had never seen so many books in her life. In the middle of the luxurious room, Hunter was engrossed in swinging himself on the gymnastic bars with a cold and arrogant look on his face. The little girl timidly approached and quickly tucked herself into a corner, secretly observing the young master's actions with caution. Finally, Jiyu found peace beside the bookshelves. She sat down on the floor and passionately read every line of text, as if forgetting all her troubles. Sensing the presence of a stranger, Hunter suddenly stopped and looked at Jiyu with eyes of astonishment mixed with unspoken curiosity. Hunter stared at Jiyu and coldly asked if the little girl actually knew how to communicate. The little girl timidly hid behind her book, softly replying to affirm that she could still speak. He didn't bother to care about the answer, immediately returning to the bars to show off his highly arrogant athleticism. Suddenly, a loud noise rang out, making Jiyu jump in terror, sensing an unusual disturbance in the space. Her face clearly showed panic as she silently wondered where that jarring sound had just come from. It turned out Hunter had tumbled to the floor. He was clutching his leg and groaning in pain from the unintended impact. Jiyu stood quietly watching from afar, witnessing the scene of the arrogant teenage boy having to brace himself to regain his balance. His deep blue eyes suddenly turned sharp and cold, displaying a stubbornness and an absolute refusal to submit. Brushing off the pain, Hunter once again threw himself onto the bars to continue the highly difficult challenge. His arms swung out in a decisive arc in midair, marking a powerful action to conclude the exhibition. Hunter tumbling to the floor made Jiyu gasp in shock, full of worry for the young master after the unexpected impact. He immediately sprang up with a face flushed with anger, gritting his teeth in bruised ego at being witnessed by the little girl. Jiyu timidly hugged her book tightly, secretly wondering if that fall just now hurt and how long he intended to be this stubborn. Ignoring the pain, Hunter grabbed the bar again and shouted loudly, affirming that he would definitely be able to do it, leaving Jiyu to simply nod in agreement. He ordered the little girl to immediately stop reading to focus on carefully observing his highly arrogant performance. Hunter took a deep breath, his deep blue eyes glinting with utter determination before pouring all his strength into the jump. With a decisive motion, he successfully executed the bar swing and cheered with exhilaration to affirm his capability. Witnessing that moment, Jiyu couldn't help but be amazed. Her eyes widened and she gasped in awe and amazement. Hunter flashed a radiant, proud smile, making Jiyu secretly think that he was even scarier than monsters or ghosts. Staring at the other's radiant face, the little girl suddenly felt a strange emotion creeping in when she saw him smile. Hunter stood towering in front of Jiyu and demanded to know what she was doing, while she secretly thought he looked nothing short of an angel descended to earth. He walked over to the massive bookshelf, then turned around and asked with deep skepticism whether she was actually at a level to read a long storybook. Receiving a confirming answer from his female friend, the young master decisively held out a book like a highly arrogant challenge. Jiyu realized that it was the Magic Tree House book, the very thing she once had to abandon right from the first pages because she felt too scared. The little girl couldn't help but be taken aback, her eyes wide open staring blankly at the book she was holding with a sense of overwhelming pressure. Hunter unexpectedly lay down on the armchair next to her, coldly ordering her to start reading everything out loud for him to hear too. Jiyu told herself that compared to the monsters in the book, this boyfriend was much scarier, so she had to muster all her courage to fulfill the request. They both lay lazily on the soft chair, Jiyu intently turning each page of paper, while Hunter quietly observed her every expression. Deep down, The little girl felt it was really bizarre because previously, fear always surrounded her whenever she had to read this storybook alone. But with Hunter's presence right next to her, Jiyu suddenly felt unusually peaceful and silently affirmed that she was no longer afraid today. Mrs. Hamilton gently pushed open the playroom door and surprisingly asked the two children what page they had read together up to. Witnessing the peaceful scene before her eyes, the noble woman couldn't help but be stunned and gasped in amazement at the miraculous change in her son. Her eyes were glued to the corner of the room, trying to capture the rare moment when her unruly precious son suddenly became unusually calm. There, Hunter and Jiyu were still engrossed in the pages, creating an atmosphere so harmonious that even adults would be astonished. Turning to Olivia, Mrs. Hamilton curiously asked if this mother frequently communicated in Korean to train her daughter. Receiving an affirmative answer from the other, she once again looked toward the two children and silently marveled at the fact that Hunter was actually sitting and reading a book with Jiyu. She recalled that her son never bothered to look at books and couldn't sit still for more than a second, yet now he was unbelievably obedient. A fleeting moment of contemplation appeared as she told herself that she was also of Korean descent but had never been strict enough to mold Hunter into shape. Meanwhile, Olivia flashed a radiant smile and continuously boasted about hiring a Korean nanny to elevate her daughter's class. Mrs. Hamilton silently calculated that if a calm little girl like Jiyu joined the tutoring, Hunter would definitely no longer act out to chase away the tutors like before. Mrs. Hamilton proposed letting Jiyu join the 2-hour Korean class every Saturday morning along with another friend named Rex. Hearing the lucrative opportunity to strengthen the bond between the two families, Olivia immediately agreed with a beaming face and eagerly asked when her daughter could officially start. From then on, the playdates that were originally considered casual socializing turned into an endless series of days due to the similarity in their circumstances and residence. Under the imposition of her ambitious mother, little Jiyu never dared to refuse any playdate invitations from the aristocratic family, even if called upon unexpectedly. The superficial intimacy of the two mothers became even stronger as they frequently walked side by side in the luxurious building's lobby every morning taking their children to school. This bond was so deep that they were willing to share a nanny to look after the two children, creating an invisible tie throughout those forced childhood years. However, in stark contrast to the parents' calculations, the young master hunter always felt Jiyu's presence was extremely annoying and detestable. He sulkily buried himself in bed, secretly resenting his mother for dragging that girl into all his activities, from Korean classes to even math on Wednesdays. Yet amidst those frustrated grumbles, the young master's deep blue eyes suddenly became pensive as he began to realize some strange emotions were kindling. Hunter quietly observed Jiyu and silently admitted that whenever he heard her read stories, all the dry tales seemed to become much more interesting and vivid. Hunter tried to brush away those soft thoughts and told himself that he didn't need the presence of his female friend at all. He recalled the old memory when he once threw a ball at Jiyu, but the silly girl let it hit right on her forehead. The dry thud of the ball bouncing against the floor made Hunter jolt awake in the middle of the night in utter panic. The young master's deep blue eyes widened in astonishment, as if he had just witnessed something incredibly extraordinary happening. Hunter looked ahead in shock and only had time to gasp in bewilderment when he saw a familiar silhouette standing tall. In his hallucination, Jiyu appeared as a giant entity with a hauntingly radiant smile right before his eyes. Suddenly, a tennis ball hurled toward her like destiny, aiming straight for the head of the girl who was absorbed in laughing and joking. Hunter panicked and rushed out of bed, screaming no, his mind now filled with nothing but sheer terror. His small hands desperately clutched at the hem of Jiyu's shirt out of fear that she would collapse to the ground once again. Everything around seemed to shatter when that figure lost her balance and tumbled among the toys scattered everywhere. Hunter's face twisted in a silent scream as the nightmare of the accident from years ago reached its peak of horror. He woke up with a start in the dead of night, breathing heavily, while the week-long grounding sentence from his family still echoed in his ears, making his mind even more frantic. Hunter sat motionless and dazed on the bed, filled with weariness, realizing he was once again besieged by those unpleasant memories. The boy secretly resented that all his troubles stemmed from the appearance of the one who always pretended to be well-behaved, Jiyu Parker, making him rather starve than be confined to the house. Contrary to her son's hostility, The two mothers became increasingly close and constantly cheered together whenever they appeared at tournaments. Hunter stood still in the middle of the deep blue tennis court, his hands gripping the ball tightly, as if wanting to pour all his frustration into the upcoming decisive match. He swallowed slightly to soothe the rising tension in his throat just before the moment of entering the do-or-die showdown. The young master's deep blue eyes were glued to his opponent, Sean Peterson, silently feeling the irony of fate having to face the most formidable foe right in the finals. Standing before the dividing net, Hunter silently assessed that the opponent not only possessed superior height, but also had considerably more impressive ability stats than himself. Although he had never won against this opponent in the past, he still harbored a fierce determination to turn the tables and claim the prestigious crown. Amidst the noisy bleachers, Jiyu Parker still calmly sat reading her book, completely ignoring the tense atmosphere of the ongoing tournament. Hunter cast a hostile glance at his female friend, silently wondering why his mother had invited this skinny bookworm here and feeling it was a complete waste of effort. He bounced the ball hard against the court to regain his focus, coldly speaking up to remind his opponent to get ready for the serve. The call to start the match rang out. Hunter tossed the ball high with a decisive posture to execute a powerful serve. He swung the racket for an extremely hard hit, internally screaming with unprovoked fury seeing that Jiyu didn't even glance at him once. On the other side of the net, Sean Peterson was no slouch either, quickly moving to catch up with the wind-piercing ball of young Master Hamilton. A razor-sharp return was launched immediately, pushing the match into a highly dramatic tug-of-war right from the first few minutes. The scoreboard quickly changed as Hunter scored the first points, proving his determination to seize the championship. Sweat rolled down his cheeks, but Hunter's eyes never left the court, even though his mind was agitated by the presence of his bookworm friend. The match quickly entered a state of balance when the score showed 15-all, signaling an uncompromising confrontation ahead. The scoreboard displayed high drama as the final match entered its deciding set after each side had secured a convincing victory. The whole stadium seemed to hold its breath as the umpire announced the two opponents would have to settle the match with a nerve-wracking tiebreak. Lauren couldn't hide her nervousness while explaining the rules to Olivia, whereas this ambitious mother enthusiastically urged everyone to cheer louder. Hunter stood in the middle of the court with a sweat-drenched face, trying to ignore the echoing cheers from the stands to maintain absolute focus. Across the stands, Jiyu Parker still nonchalantly sat reading her book and smiled faintly, as if immersed in her own separate world. His friend's indifference made Hunter inevitably feel frustrated and distracted. He silently wondered why he even cared about such a heartless person. Right then, Sean Peterson delivered a powerful return, forcing Hunter to use all his strength to move and hold his ground. In a fit of rage over being ignored, Hunter swung his racket for a fierce counterstrike. Deep down, he couldn't stop screaming at being looked down upon. The racket face collided directly with the ball with extreme force, creating a razor-sharp trajectory, tearing through the air straight toward the opponent. The ball landed right on the baseline to everyone's astonishment, marking an incredibly high-class and dramatic point. Jiyu maintained her calm demeanor, her eyes never leaving the pages of her book despite the surrounding noise, making the atmosphere of the match even more strained. Hunter felt his anger flare up. He gritted his teeth, telling himself that he truly couldn't stand this bookworm friend's personality for another second. After the match, Mrs. Hamilton happily suggested they all go to a Korean restaurant to celebrate her precious son's glorious victory, to Olivia's enthusiastic agreement. The noblewoman affectionately thanked Jiyu for coming to cheer, asserting that whenever the little girl was present, Hunter always seemed to have good luck and win. The young Master Hamilton pouted slightly in skepticism, secretly thinking there was no such ridiculous thing as a lucky charm named Jiyu Parker. Yet a fleeting moment of shock appeared in his mind as Hunter began to realize the ironic truth that he actually needed the presence of that girl to stabilize his mentality. The boy dazedly recalled the humiliating losses to weaker opponents just because he completely lost focus right from the first serves. Hunter stood in stunned contemplation, constantly raising questions in his mind about this unusual change and where the real problem lay in those failures. The young master's face went blank as the remark about Jiyu being his lucky charm kept echoing endlessly, even though his rationality was weakly trying to deny it. Standing before the empty court, Hunter suddenly realized with a start that throughout recent tournaments, The skinny silhouette of that bookworm friend had completely vanished from the cheering stands. Hunter scratched his head in sheer frustration, silently denying that the frail bookworm could be his lucky charm and affirming she was nothing but bad luck. Time passed until May. As the gentle spring breezes blew through Central Park, it was also when the third trimester of their third grade year was halfway done. On her way home from school, Jiyu unexpectedly bumped into Mrs. Song Sunya, the familiar nanny, standing and waving at the little girl with an incredibly gentle smile. The little girl couldn't help but be bewildered, asking in confusion upon hearing the title deaconess that the woman had just called herself. Jiyu anxiously asked about her mother and received the explanation that Olivia was busy volunteering at the school's charity fair, so she couldn't pick her up as usual. The two leisurely held hands and went for a walk. Mrs. Sunya thoughtfully asked about the interesting things the little girl had learned at school today. Hunter suddenly closed in from behind, terrifying Jiyu so much she jumped. The little girl unexpectedly got the hiccups due to his unannounced appearance. The young Master Hamilton leaned his face close and whispered a definitive order into her ear to come straight to the treehouse as soon as she got back. He decisively turned and walked away with his familiar cold demeanor, leaving Jiyu still standing in a daze, having not yet grasped what was going on. Watching his retreating back, Jiyu shuddered slightly and silently affirmed that Hunter's abruptness had truly given her a scare. Jiyu wondered, as this was the first time Hunter had proactively asked to meet her. She secretly worried about the troubles that might occur at the treehouse. Right then, the little lady Sienna unexpectedly approached and pressed to know whether Jiyu was truly intimate with the young master of the Hamilton family. Jiyu gently shook her head in denial, greatly surprising Sienna, because she firmly insisted she had caught the two together many times. Although deep down she always considered Hunter as a part of her family, Jiyu bitterly admitted that the two of them always had to pretend not to know each other whenever they were at school. Faced with Jiyu's awkward attitude, Sienna could only silently observe with a highly suspicious look, waiting for a satisfactory answer. Feeling ignored, Sienna decisively turned her back and walked away, dropping a challenging remark to just pretend they had never known each other if the other didn't want to admit it. Jiyu's extreme shyness made Sienna feel incredibly frustrated and disappointed at being unable to extract any more information. Jiyu stood dazed in the middle of the street, her heart heavy with questions about a vague relationship where they met frequently but couldn't be called close. The little girl hurriedly asked her nanny Sunya and received confirmation that the blonde girl just now was indeed Lady Sienna. Astonishment clearly showed on Jiyu's face when Mrs. Sunya revealed that Sienna's mother was Rebecca Reed, a world-renowned designer. Mrs. Sunya told her that Sienna was an extremely popular child, frequently hosting lavish parties that made anyone yearn to attend just once. Hearing that, Jiyu could only bow her head in deep insecurity. She was way too shy and always felt suffocated by the nickname shy little girl that everyone constantly called her. Her mother, Olivia, never stopped pushing Jiyu to become more extroverted, because in America, those who express themselves well always receive outstanding favor. She even flew into a rage at her husband, loudly criticizing that Jiyu's meekness was entirely due to inheriting the weak genes from her father's side. Despite wanting her child to attend a debate academy for self-improvement, Olivia didn't understand that Jiyu truly wanted to be confident, but things never went her way. The little girl ambled along, her heart full of regret for not being able to decisively fire back at Sienna that she and Hunter were never even friends to begin with. Hunter's whispered command about the appointment at the treehouse once again echoed in her mind, making the little girl's heart inevitably pound rapidly. The young master's sudden change made Jiyu feel restless. She always felt uncomfortable having to stand next to someone so outstanding and eye-catching as him. Jiyu stole a glance at Sienna's haughty silhouette fading into the distance, silently comparing that lady's coldness to the overwhelming demeanor of the Hamilton heir. The little girl wondered if Hunter ever knew fear of people's stares, or if the prestigious Hamilton surname itself had forged a completely different metal compared to other illustrious families. Jiyu ambled along with a nanny at the foot of the massive building, her heart still heavy with the highly awkward conversation just now. The little girl secretly tormented herself over her own weakness and couldn't help but crave the bold, fearless metal, like the way Hunter faced the world. The sound of a ball hitting the wooden wall echoed steadily from the treehouse, making Jiyu realize the young master was already there. The little girl softly expressed her wish to go see Hunter immediately, which greatly surprised Nanny Suanya with this abrupt decision. After confirming that it was Hunter's order, Jiyu received a nod from Mrs. Suanya along with a promise of a delicious snack waiting for her. Silently approaching the wooden structure, the little girl wondered why someone who had never been too keen on her suddenly wanted to meet privately like this. The image of the unfinished fantasy novel from last time appeared to her mind, making her secretly guess the purpose of this appointment. Stepping onto the old wooden stairs, Jiyu secretly thought that instead of hiding in this place, meeting in the luxurious penthouse would probably be less suffocating. Stepping inside, she caught Hunter sitting in a daze with a tennis ball in his hand, his face showing a fleeting look of pensiveness, completely different from his usual arrogant demeanor. Even though she knew full well that Hunter was capable of reading books himself, Jiyu still couldn't understand why he insisted on forcing her to personally read the story out loud for him. Jiyu timidly peeked her head inside the treehouse with a highly guarded and anxious look. Hunter casually occupied her familiar seat and grumpily asked how Jiyu Parker could be so late. The little girl secretly felt resentful because he stubbornly called her by the Korean name she hated the most instead of the fancy name Olivia, then coldly asked the reason for this meeting. The young master lightly spun the tennis ball in his hand while announcing that he would have an important tournament this coming Saturday. Jiyu blankly wondered what was so special about that since Hunter had already been competing since last year. She recalled the times Hunter endlessly boasted about joining the elite athletes group and owning a private tennis court right in his basement. Her mother, Olivia, also constantly pushed her daughter to learn this high-class sport to prepare for a useful future later on. A sudden flare of anger made Hunter shout loudly to reiterate about the tournament, causing Jiyu to jump in terror and shrink back. While the little girl was still awkwardly unsure of what to do, Hunter decisively ordered her to come with him. Under the young master's sharp gaze, Jiyu gasped as she realized Hunter had made her trek all the way here just to demand her presence at the upcoming tournament. Jiyu decisively refused Hunter's request and explained that she was busy attending her friend Chloe's birthday party. The little girl gently reminded the young master that a birthday only happens once a year, while his tennis tournaments took place continuously. Hunter angrily sprang up from his chair, making Jiyu inevitably wonder and pressed to ask if there was any special reason compelling her to be there. The young master Hamilton irritably scratched his head in sheer frustration, secretly wondering why this usually taciturn girl became so argumentative and stubborn when facing him. Even though he felt that lowering himself to ask for a favor was humiliating, Hunter still asserted that there was definitely a critical reason forcing Jiyu to tag along. Two pairs of feet stood facing each other in the suffocating space. Jiyu was bewildered when hearing Hunter declare that there was something extremely important to confirm. Hunter looked straight into his little friend's eyes with an unprecedentedly serious face, preparing to deliver a highly unexpected confession. He coldly declared that he wanted to verify whether Jiyu was truly a lucky charm that helped him win or just a baseless rumor. Amidst the scattered books on the wooden table, little Jiyu could only stand in stunned silence because she couldn't understand where that bizarre lucky charm title came from. Hunter tightly shut his eyes in deep bitterness as he recalled the disastrous defeat at the previous tournament, the moment when his bookworm friend's silhouette was completely absent. Hunter coldly asserted that the reason causing his defeat in the recent match was entirely due to her absence, making Jiyu only gasp in utter astonishment. The Hamilton boy irritably mocked whether that was the only word she knew how to say, while feeling helpless as he couldn't get properly angry at that blank face. Trying to suppress his impatience, Hunter tightly shut his eyes, telling himself that he was the one in a weak position and truly needed the other's help. He recalled the feeling of extreme exhilaration when standing on the podium of glory and raising the championship trophy high amidst the cheers, a glorious moment hard to find again. Hunter started to seriously explain that any great tennis player possesses a distinct lucky ritual for themselves. There are those who always meticulously arrange their water bottles in a fixed order before every match to seek absolute peace of mind. Then there are those so superstitious that they are willing to wear the same pair of socks throughout an entire tournament just because of the belief that they will bring victory after one lucky time. Even some athletes consider having their father standing by their side supporting them as a lucky charm to help them overcome all pressure on the court. Hunter smirked slightly looking at Jiyu and called her a dummy. Deep down, he hoped the little girl could understand the profound underlying meaning behind the examples just now. However, Jiyu was still completely lost amidst the unfamiliar theories. The little girl could only innocently press to ask what all of that had to do with her. Hunter stayed silent for a moment, then let out a softly melancholy sigh, his face showing a fleeting look of pensiveness when facing the harsh reality that just occurred. The boy absent-mindedly listed out the fact that he had worn the exact familiar outfit and shoes that once brought victory, but was still eliminated from the finals in utter bitterness. Turning to look at Jiyu with a razor-sharp gaze, Hunter asserted that the only difference in this failed competition was her absence. He decisively pointed his finger straight at his little friend's face and accused that precisely because she didn't come to cheer, everything turned out so terribly. Despite Jiyu's protest that it was a ridiculous argument, Hunter still resolutely demanded to conduct a test to determine whether she was truly a lucky charm or not. He affirmed that if he won the next match, she was indeed his lucky charm, ignoring Jiyu, who was trying to offer a weak explanation. Hunter didn't hesitate to threaten to have his mother invite Jiyu's mother over if she refused to cooperate, making the little girl angrily call it a blatant act of cheating. Jiyu fell silent before her friend's arrogance, secretly blaming Hunter for being someone who always acted regardless of reason and forced the world to revolve around him. She immediately associated it with the concept of a selfish person she had just read in a book and silently affirmed that Hunter's personality completely matched that definition. In that moment, Jiyu's eyes suddenly flashed with a brilliant light as she unexpectedly realized an important detail related to her book. Jiyu suddenly remembered the storybook titled The Kissing Hand, where a little raccoon always felt scared whenever having to go to school without his mother by his side. To give her child strength, the mother bear placed a kiss full of love right in the middle of the little raccoon's palm. Just by pressing that hand against his cheek, the baby raccoon would feel like his mother was always by his side, even though the two were actually far apart. Jiyu recalled that she herself had once stuck heart stickers on her palm to seek comfort whenever she had to participate in highly awkward playdates. Unexpectedly, the little girl softly called Hunter's name, making the boy who was engrossed in tossing the ball turn around to answer with a highly disgruntled and annoyed face. Jiyu started explaining a psychological theory that people don't necessarily have to always be present next to each other to feel a connection. Hunter frowned, asking what all that philosophy meant, then abruptly ordered his friend to hold out her left hand with the palm facing up. Even though she was still full of questions, Jiyu obediently held out her hand, waiting to see what action young Master Hamilton intended to take next. Touching those hands, the little girl suddenly fell silent when seeing the calluses, a clear testament to Hunter's crazy training efforts. Jiyu softly used her finger to slowly write the first letter on the other's palm, making Hunter involuntarily jump at the unfamiliar sensation spreading. Hunter jumped in shock when feeling a tickle on his palm. He bewilderedly yelled, asking what trick his friend was trying to pull right now. Jiyu maintained a serious face. She demanded Hunter Hamilton stay quiet and listen because this was a highly effective method from a best-selling book. Using her small finger, the little girl began to neatly write the first letter on the young master's rough palm. Hunter suddenly blushed red, his heart beating wildly as he felt the warmth from the tip of Jiyu's finger continuing to write another character. Jiyu declared that she had finished the final letter to piece together a secret message, ignoring the astonishment clearly visible on the other's face. The little girl gently lowered her melancholy eyes, seemingly struggling fiercely internally before executing the most important step of the lucky ritual. Unexpectedly, Jiyu bowed her head and placed a very gentle yet highly sincere kiss right in the middle of Hunter's palm. That moment seemed to freeze in time. The tiny girl wholeheartedly executed the hand kiss exactly like how the mother bear transferred strength to her child. Hunter stood rooted to the spot with a bright red face, his eyes open to their widest in utter shock at this sudden, bold action. Jiyu looked up at him and explained that from now on, whenever Hunter held his racket with his hand, he would always feel her cheering. Jiyu gently held both of Hunter's hands and softly said that the feeling would remain as intact as if she was physically present to watch his match. The little girl thoughtfully instructed Hunter to clench his hand tight, so the lucky kiss wouldn't fade away. Jiyu squeezed her eyes shut with a look of utter sincerity, silently praying that this tiny miracle would truly work to help her friend overcome the pressure. She secretly hoped that Hunter would truly believe in this ritual so his mind would be more stabilized before important tournaments. Hunter quietly tightened his fist. It seemed he was trying to feel the strange warmth seeping deep into his mind. Unexpectedly, The young master turned and walked away with a highly cold demeanor, leaving Jiyu to merely look on in bewilderment and wonder if he was getting angry. Hunter walked away gritting his teeth in deep embarrassment, secretly telling himself that if this test on the lucky charm didn't bring the expected results, he abruptly spun around with a face flushed red from shyness, but still tried to shout a loud threat that his friend would pay a heavy price if she dared to deceive him. Ending the threat, Hunter hurriedly ran out of the treehouse, as if wanting to hide from the chaotic emotions surging in his heart. Watching her friend's silhouette disappear behind the foliage, Jiyu could only sigh in frustration and silently conclude that Hunter truly was someone with a terrible personality. Jiyu sat dazedly on the chair with melancholy eyes, cherishing her favorite book in her hands as if searching for a tiny comfort amidst the suffocating reality. The door suddenly swung wide open as her mother Olivia walked in with a polished appearance, coldly ordering her daughter to quickly head to the penthouse to join the playdate with Hunter. The little girl couldn't help but ask in confusion if she had to go right now, but that hesitation only received a highly irritable, urging attitude from her mother. Olivia used the excuse that she was busy getting her nails done and her father was buried in work to force her daughter to leave, making Jiyu quietly bow her head in compliance. The little girl gathered her stack of books and secretly thought that she would take this opportunity to return the borrowed ones while also looking for a few new stories. Jiyu's eyes suddenly showed a hint of radiance when she remembered she could also see Daisy again, Hunter's incredibly adorable little sister who was just born last year. Her tiny feet walked on the luxurious red carpet, every step carrying a silent resignation to the highly ambitious arrangements of the adults. Approaching the extravagant reception desk, Jiyu gently raised her hand to signal for a staff member to assist in activating the elevator to the top floor of the building. Standing all alone in the quiet elevator space, the little girl hugged her book tightly to her chest and silently prayed that today's meeting wouldn't be too stressful. Jiyu's gaze stopped on the cover of the Magic Treehouse book, her only companion helping her escape into the world of dreams. Jiyu recalled Hunter's mother saying that the act of her reading books beside him had brought an incredibly positive impact. But the little girl secretly doubted whether an arrogant person like Hunter could truly be changed by anyone, and only wished the boy wouldn't be at home right now. Jiyu's gaze suddenly froze when she caught sight of an incredibly sparkling, bright golden aura capturing all her attention. Before her eyes was the image of a highly proud Hunter raising the elementary school tennis championship trophy, affirming the status of a true champion. The little girl silently admired that glorious item with astonishment and a fleeting sense of admiration for the young master's talent. From the moment he confirmed Jiyu was indeed his lucky charm, Hunter Hamilton's gaze towards her had completely shifted into a strange state. Instead of treating her as an inanimate piece of furniture in the playroom like before, he now frequently hung himself on the bars to observe her with curiosity mixed with suspicion. He even acted extremely furiously and punched the wall hard just because Jiyu accidentally pretended not to see him when they bumped into each other at the sports center. Jiyu let out a softly melancholy sigh. She yearned to go back to the old days when everything was still simple. The little girl secretly thought that she would feel much more comfortable if Hunter just considered her an anonymous beanbag chair instead of having to endure this highly stressful attention. Ever since then, whenever a tournament approached, Hunter would call Jiyu to the treehouse and urge her to write her name on his palm immediately. Despite being in a lower position, Jiyu bravely refused and declared she wouldn't do it unless it was a truly important tournament. The little girl advised young Master Hamilton to stop relying on lucky charms and focus on improving his actual skills, leaving Hunter speechless with a look of utter astonishment. In the gloomy atmosphere that enveloped them, Jiyu secretly feared that her blunt words had actually sent her friend into a fit of rage by hurting his pride. Returning to her room, she constantly tormented herself over why she had said that, feeling strange that an arrogant person like Hunter was unusually silent. In the quiet moment, a sudden thought flashed through her mind, making Jiyu staggeringly realize the power shift taking place in their relationship. She startlingly realized that precisely because she held the title of his sole lucky charm, Hunter didn't dare to yell or resist like before. From the moment Jiyu became an indispensable lucky charm, the seesaw that had always tilted in Hunter's favor for years suddenly began to wobble. On that scale of destiny, the timid bookworm had now gently gained the upper hand, forcing the arrogant boy to yield control. Jiyu immersed herself in a sense of superiority as sweet as cotton candy, completely unaware that this fragile position could be overturned at any moment. Brilliant autumn scenery enveloped the school campus, where crimson maple leaves were softly shifting in the breeze. Astor School lacked a separate sports field, so students usually had to gather at a cramped sports center for physical education. Due to the limited space, Central Park became the ideal alternative, where girls' hair fluttered in the sunny autumn wind. Suddenly, a group of schoolgirls buzzed with excitement upon spotting the arrival of Hunter and his close friend Rex approaching. The two elite boys from Alton School strode with full confidence, exuding the aura of true stars in their athletic sportswear. The group kept gossiping about the recent musical. Some praised Rex for being cute as Captain Hook, while others insisted Hunter was the most attractive one. Standing amidst the bustling crowd, 12-year-old Jiyu secretly felt this discussion was utterly bizarre as puberty hormones began to dominate their brains. That was the time when distinct cliques clearly started forming in 5th grade and became more solidified as they officially entered 6th grade. While Jiyu considered herself merely an eccentric bookworm, Hunter and Rex naturally belonged to the popular crowd that always drew every gaze. An unexpected clearing of a throat interrupted the gossip, making the girls startle and panic as they faced the imposing presence of the other party. Sienna Reed proudly bragged to her friends that Hunter Hamilton had just looked at her with an incredibly affectionate gaze. But Jiyu inwardly retorted that Hunter was a selfish jerk who would never bother paying attention to anyone but himself. She wearily noticed that the surrounding crowd was always going crazy even when Hunter only performed completely meaningless actions. Jiyu quietly signaled her friend Chloe to stay silent upon hearing the mention that Hunter had long been the dream guy of the young lady Sienna. Amidst that bustling atmosphere, Jiyu's eyes briefly showed a hint of melancholy as she watched the popular students becoming the center of attention in the park. She regretted choosing track and field just to be near Hunter, secretly thinking that playing volleyball would probably have been much more comfortable. Suddenly, Hunter slightly tilted his head and glanced toward Jiyu with his sharp, deep blue eyes, creating a dramatically noticeable moment. Jiyu froze in astonishment upon realizing that the arrogant young master was looking directly at her in front of so many people. Hunter nonchalantly turned and walked away as if nothing had happened, leaving his friend standing stunned amidst the blazing red maple leaves. Jiyu confusedly touched her neck, secretly wondering if Hunter was intentionally greeting her in an attention-grabbing way, knowing full well she absolutely hated being stared at. Jiyu curiously asked Chloe why Hunter became everyone's idol, listening to her friend praise his handsome appearance. The truth was that Hunter Hamilton always appeared as a perfect role model, both wealthy and a highly promising sports star of the school. Looking deep into reality, Jiyu silently agreed with those remarks, but her eyes still concealed thoughts about his true nature. The teacher's call to gather rang out, interrupting her train of thought. Jiyu walked on, telling herself that appearances were just a perfect facade. Standing in the ranks, she questioned herself whether everyone would still adore Hunter if they understood the selfishness and stubbornness hidden behind that face. Continuing to stride on the long track, Jiyu pondered the predetermined futures of prestigious heirs with their Ivy League privileges. A stern look briefly crossed her face as she thought about the unfairness of the unspoken rules that always favored those with massive family backgrounds. Amidst the brilliant autumn scenery, Jiyu suddenly wondered if dedicating one's entire life to tennis truly made a person attractive. She gently squeezed her eyes shut to feel the cool breeze, trying to regain tranquility amidst the complex inner turmoil of adolescence. Hunter unexpectedly sprinted past, creating a rushing rhythm that instantly brought Jiyu back to her senses, confirming that his world originally had nothing to do with hers. Jiyu slightly turned her head back with a highly anxious gaze, as if trying to search for something amidst the bustling crowd. She jolted in fright upon realizing that Hunter had been standing right behind her at some point, causing her heart to inevitably skip a beat. Trying to find a way to slip aside to maintain a safe distance, Jiyu nervously realized the path was too narrow, leaving her unsure of what to do. The awkwardness reached its peak when her small foot suddenly missed a step, causing a disastrous tumble right on the running track. The surrounding crowd began buzzing about the fall of Olivia, the girl who is famous from the glamorous Neverland musical. A feeling of extreme humiliation washed over Jiyu, turning her face bright red, as she silently told herself she looked like nothing but an idiot in everyone's eyes. While some wanted to help, Hunter coldly yelled, demanding everyone shut their mouths and continue their run. Amidst her despair, Jiyu was suddenly stunned to see a firm hand unexpectedly reach out right in front of her, like an unforeseen salvation. Hunter stood there with a cold demeanor and beads of sweat rolling down his forehead, silently watching her with an unpredictable gaze. Tears fell endlessly due to surging frustration. Jiyu agonizingly thought to herself that she just wanted to jump into the lake right away to escape reality. Jiyu confusedly grabbed her own hands, secretly fearing that the young master hunter would mock and ridicule her once again. She tried to hold back her welling tears, afraid that such an action would only draw even more unwarranted attention from the people around her. Bracing herself to stand up after the fall, she briefly glanced at the Eton School logo on her sportswear with the determination that she was not allowed to collapse. However, a firm hand unexpectedly grabbed her shoulder tightly, making Jiyu jump in fright and only managed to let out a bewildered gasp. Towering in front of her was Hunter's tall figure, radiating an overwhelming pressure that completely overshadowed the small girl. Jiyu's eyes widened in sheer astonishment as she looked straight into the apathetic yet incredibly sharp face of the powerful young master. Jiyu's heart pounded relentlessly in her chest as she faced a sharp, cold gaze that seemed to pierce right through her soul. Hunter frowned in utter annoyance, then grumpily questioned if she was crazy to run for her life in such a bizarre way. Jiyu stood facing Hunter, clearly feeling the height difference and the pressure from him weighing heavily on her mind. Hunter flashed a highly mocking smile and advised Jiyu to exercise more, so she would be less wobbly and stop tripping so absurdly like she just did. A flare of anger made Jiyu decisively shake off Hunter's hand and demand he let her go immediately, despite the young master still grumbling in annoyance, even though he had intended to help. Hunter coldly turned and walked away, leaving Jiyu standing speechless in the vibrant autumn park while Sienna Reed's silhouette began to appear in the background. Jiyu looked back in shock upon hearing a highly contemptuous snort coming from the haughty young lady approaching. Sienna's azure eyes narrowed calculationally, as if trying to pierce through and scrutinize every emotion churning inside Jiyu right now. A cryptic smile bloomed on Sienna's lips, signaling new troubles about to crash down on the already exhausted bookworm. Sienna pretended to care, asking if Olivia was okay after the fall, leaving Jiyu to only awkwardly reply that she was fine. Giving a slight nod of thanks for the other's hollow inquiry, Jiyu quickly turned away to escape the pressuring, scrutinizing gaze. Sighing with utter exhaustion, Jiyu regretted her decision to join track and field, secretly wishing she had chosen volleyball so things wouldn't have been this messy. After that day, having witnessed another side of Hunter Hamilton, the 6th grade girls of Astor School suddenly went crazy, as if catching an autumn fever. Meanwhile, the young master maintained his cold, distant expression, casually striding past all those admiring gazes without caring in the slightest. In a different setting, Jiyu appeared in an incredibly elegant cream-colored evening gown, her hair tied with a sophisticated floral bow, but her eyes held a melancholy look. Her mother, Olivia, wore a luxurious black dress full of pride, simultaneously boasting about her skills and reminding her daughter to quickly put on her gloves to get ready to leave. Jiyu slightly bowed her head with a face clearly showing reluctance. The little girl silently complained internally that she truly didn't want to attend this gathering. It was the social ballroom dance class, where children from 11 to 13 were draped in expensive formal wear to learn how to dance the waltz and foxtrot. Under the dazzling chandeliers and elegant roses, this was considered the last remnant of the debutante ball era, a closed-off world meant solely for the elite class. Mrs. Olivia meticulously tied the bows on her daughter's gloves while reminding Jiyu to be grateful to Hunter's mother for writing the recommendation letter, a prerequisite for them to step into this social tier. Those powerful recommendation letters were one of the most effective ways for the upper class to protect and maintain the exclusivity of their private world. Olivia smiled with satisfaction and affirmed that living next to wealthy people truly brought countless privileges, ignoring Jiyu, who was still standing in a daze with obvious anxiety. Jiyu silently pondered over the fact that lately, the popular girls at school were only gossiping about fancy dresses and shoes. She lightly grabbed the hem of her cream dress and secretly complained that she truly hated this outfit that looked like a junior bridesmaid's dress and she didn't want to waltz with loud boys either. Her tiny feet walked in awkwardness, making Jiyu wonder if she was the only one being dragged into this mess. Standing in front of the magnificent hall, the little girl briefly looked up at her mother and curiously asked if young Master Hunter was attending today's ceremony. Mrs. Olivia stated with certainty that the Hamilton family had participated for generations, even though this time the young master threw a tantrum because he didn't want to go. A faint smile appeared on Jiyu's lips as she imagined the arrogant Hunter having to miserably dance with girls, secretly thinking it must be an amusing spectacle. However, the cheerful mood was soon extinguished when her mother turned around and crankily asked why she was walking as slowly as if she were crawling on the street. Jiyu's face clearly showed pain as she explained that her feet were incredibly sore and she truly despised these tight shoes. Mrs. Olivia was stunned, then immediately knelt down in the middle of the street to check the injury, leaving Jiyu standing still in astonishment. The little girl's face turned bright red from embarrassment upon seeing the people around starting to notice, and she hurriedly urged her mother to stand up at once. Mrs. Olivia coldly examined Jiyu's foot, then clicked her tongue, and asserted that the girl didn't even have a blister, so she shouldn't throw a fit. Despite Jiyu's earnest pleas to go home because her feet were in too much pain to dance, her mother still grumpily told her not to act nonsensically. She reminisced about her impoverished past having only a torn pair of shoes, emphasizing that blisters must burst and turn into calluses to truly grow up. Looking at her daughter's fragile appearance, Olivia secretly felt disdain and thought that if the girl had been born an orphan like her, she would have starved to death long ago. Her hands rubbed hard on the pale skin, then irritably claimed that even though she bought her nice shoes, all her daughter did was complain. Witnessing the soft feet without a single callus, that woman swore she would not let her child inherit her humiliating, starving, and uneducated life. She was determined to mold Jiyu into a true noble lady, one who would live an elevated life and never be tainted by poverty. Olivia loudly reminded her that she had to throw away her long-held pride in front of Hunter's mother just to get her a step into the upper class. Despite the visible resentment on her daughter's face, she coldly ordered her to put her shoes on immediately to continue their ambitious journey. 10. Jiyu bitterly realized that her mother was always a dictator forcing everything, which made her constantly harbor the intention of rebelling one day to escape this control. Jiyu gently let her mother hold her hand, silently telling herself that she would never have enough courage to rebel for fear of making her mother sad. Whispers and chatter echoed throughout the magnificent ballroom under the radiant chandeliers, where the esteemed guests had fully gathered. The little girl trembled in fear upon realizing she was the latest arrival and there wasn't a single empty seat left in this massive room. Despite Jiyu's earnest pleas that she had a stomachache and didn't want to join, Mrs. Olivia still coldly demanded her daughter stop whining and go inside. As soon as she stepped into the hall, her small figure attracted the attention of the elderly butler who was standing and observing in the middle of the room. He gently spoke up, suggesting the young lady who had just entered step forward to find a suitable seat for herself. Then, he turned to request young Master Hamilton to politely stand up and offer a seat to the lady who had just arrived. Jiyu stood frozen in shock, her heart tightening as she secretly asked herself why destiny ironically forced her to face Hunter right at this moment. Under the sparkling halo of lights, Hunter apathetically stood up in his luxurious formal attire, exuding a haughty aura that made thousands fear him. The young Master Hamilton looked down, staring piercingly into Jiyu's trembling eyes, creating a pressure-filled silence that left her only able to gasp in a choked voice. Hunter glanced briefly with his deep blue eyes full of coldness, his arrogant aura seemingly freezing the surrounding space. Leaving Jiyu standing stunned with a pale face, her eyes wide with amazement at the opponent's unimaginable act of giving up his seat. She secretly thought she had never seen such a selfish person like Hunter willingly give up anything for anyone, fearing that he would find a way to settle the debt later when it was just the two of them. However, in a state of extreme confusion, Jiyu unconsciously sat down on the regal chair that the young Master Hamilton had just left with a completely bewildered mood. A feeling of pressure weighed heavily on her small shoulders as she realized all eyes in the hall were fixed on her in a scrutinizing and heavy manner. Right at that moment, Alexander Rex de Lafayette appeared with a radiant smile on his lips and offered an intimate greeting, leaving Jiyu to shyly respond in awkwardness. The little girl's face flushed with embarrassment as she had to sit in the center position right next to Hunter, a suffocating atmosphere enveloping her mind. Hunter stood silently right behind the chair, his firm hands gripping the backrest, creating an oppressive presence for the trembling Jiyu in front. The young Master Hamilton frowned in annoyance and threw a sarcastic remark, criticizing the troublesome Lafayette for acting exactly like his father. The endless verbal war about titles and personalities between the two noble boys made Jiyu sigh in boredom, secretly telling herself that these exhausting troubles were starting all over again. The relationship between the two great families had been tightly bound for many generations, as even their fathers were soulmates. In the luxurious space, Hunter was required to show politeness by standing behind and gently pushing the chair for Lady Jiyu to sit down. Rex smiled smugly, saying he almost had to pair up for a dance with the hateful Hunter if Jiyu hadn't appeared in time. The tense atmosphere was suddenly interrupted when the elderly butler sternly called young Master Hamilton's name to remind him of his manners. Jiyu shrank back in extreme embarrassment, secretly wondering if she should find a way to run away immediately to escape this mess. Hunter's firm hands gripped the backrest tightly, performing the action decisively, yet still exuding an untamable arrogance. The young master glanced briefly at Jiyu with a sharp, cold look, making the little girl shudder and stand rooted in astonishment. Despite their prestigious backgrounds, Hunter and Rex seemed born to be irreconcilable rivals just because of their massive egos and competitiveness. However, they coordinated incredibly well in their mischievous pranks, only to frequently endure shared punishments since they were little. Watching the chaotic scene unfold before her eyes, Jiyu could only remain silent and melancholically wonder if those two troublemakers would ever stop causing problems. The sight of the Hamilton and Lafayette families gathering brought back memories of the children's troublesome past right from their childhood. When Hunter and Rex in their childhood, despite frequently being punished, always kept their stubborn nature and were ready to rebel against adults. Hunter's firm hands suddenly gripped the backrest tightly, making Jiyu fear she would be caught in the middle of the two young masters' war. Hunter coldly questioned why Jiyu became Rex's dance partner and then icily demanded that he go find someone else immediately. In response to that aggression was Rex's meaningfully smirking smile, as if he had grasped his friend's deepest secrets. The Lafayette young master leaned close to Jiyu's ear and repeated the dramatic rumors about Hunter's feelings for her. Jiyu's eyes widened in sheer astonishment as she heard him firmly assert that the rude young master was actually secretly crushing on her. The little girl sighed in frustration and tried to brush off those unrealistic thoughts, believing this was merely a baseless, persistent joke from Rex. Yet Hunter's hand suddenly gripped Jiyu's arm tightly, accompanied by a deep blue, possessive gaze, as if wanting to assert control. Rex once again whispered with absolute certainty, demanding she believe him, because he knew for sure that Hunter Hamilton's heart already belonged to her. Rex smiled mischievously and affirmed that young Master Hunter always lost control whenever anything involved Jiyu's presence. He brought up old memories from Korean class to the playroom, where Hunter always found every way to prevent Rex from sitting next to or playing with her. Rex made a highly provocative observation that Hunter would never act like that if he hadn't truly developed feelings for Jiyu. Jiyu silently bowed her head, secretly denying it and thinking that her close friend's speculations were ridiculous because that was absolutely impossible. She bitterly compared herself to an old toy that Hunter was sick of, yet his selfish nature wouldn't allow anyone else to touch it. With a visibly sorrowful face, Jiyu decisively spoke up, saying Rex was completely wrong to try and force those feelings onto Hunter. She firmly emphasized that the young Master Hamilton didn't like her at all, even as Rex continued looking at her with a knowing and confident gaze. Seeing she didn't believe him, Rex immediately suggested a small test so Jiyu could witness Hunter's true reaction with her own eyes. He slyly whispered into Jiyu's ear, asking her to ignore Hunter and choose him as her first dance partner, making her inevitably anxious about the impending consequences. Exactly as predicted, Hunter stood from afar, clenching his coattails in a fit of rage, his deep blue eyes flashing with a fiery anger that made Jiyu feel incredibly terrified. Mr. Walter Membrook boisterously introduced himself as the director of the cotillion class and proudly recalled the tradition of teaching many generations of the elite. Right after the suggestion to get acquainted with the person next to them, Rex's mischievous finger lightly tapped Jiyu's shoulder to begin his provocative plan. Rex urged her to perform the greeting ritual with him first, and reassured her not to worry about anything else at this moment. Jiyu gently introduced her name as Olivia Parker according to proper etiquette, while Hunter behind her was radiating an uncomfortable pressure. The Lafayette young master was not to be outdone, as he loudly proclaimed his long, regal name with an extremely smug attitude. Rex unexpectedly reminded Jiyu that she should look straight into his eyes when shaking hands, just like the teacher taught, leaving the little girl bewildered by this abruptness. Witnessing that intimate scene, Hunter stood beside them, clenching his fists and trying to suppress the wrath that was on the verge of erupting in his heart. The young Master Hamilton glared with full resentment, but Rex merely responded nonchalantly with a provocative gaze, as if wanting to taunt his rival. Rex playfully offered to perform a magical eye-color-changing trick for Jiyu to see, suddenly lightening up the tense atmosphere. Jiyu blossomed a radiant smile that erased all worries and gently teased, asking what mischievous prank her best friend was planning to pull on her. Hunter suddenly stopped in his tracks, his hands tightly gripping his coat tails as if trying to restrain an intense wave of emotion about to overflow. The young master turned with a sharp, cold look full of apathy, radiating an arrogant aura that made the surrounding atmosphere extremely suffocating. Not letting Jiyu react in time, Hunter abruptly reached out and grabbed her wrist tightly, a decisive action clearly displaying his possessiveness. He boldly declared that it was his turn and pulled the little girl towards him, completely brushing aside the presence of the young Master Rex. The Hamilton young master's deep blue eyes drilled into her mind, flashing a powerful and incredibly sharp warning look. Hunter coldly ordered Jiyu to begin the formal greeting as he sat down right next to her with a deeply oppressive attitude. In a state of extreme confusion, Jiyu stammered out her full name, Olivia Jiyu Parker, her face clearly showing tension and timidity. Witnessing her anxious expression, Hunter clicked his tongue in annoyance, secretly thinking that just moments ago she was still laughing and talking so happily with someone else. The young master forcefully squeezed Jiyu's hand and then loudly announced his own name, Hunter Han Hamilton, like a steely assertion of sovereignty. Jiyu's heart seemingly stopped beating when facing the relentless assault and the heavily possessive gaze from the arrogant young master. Jiyu let out a soft cry of pain, causing Hunter to clearly show his frustration, his deep blue eyes flashing with irritation as he had to suppress his emotions before her fragility. The young Master Hamilton sullenly and decisively pulled the little girl away, ignoring the clear confusion on her face. In her mind, Jiyu secretly doubted how he could possibly like her, while Rex kept whispering and affirming that she was completely wrong. Hunter silently brought his hand to his chin with a pensive look, seemingly besieged by complex thoughts about the past. Childhood memories rushed back when Rex curiously asked Hunter if it was true he only carried 1/4 Korean blood. Then the conceited boy held up his test paper and firmly stated that no matter how hard Hunter tried, he could never beat him. Rex excitedly called Jiyu by the intimate nickname Liv and asked about her origins, making Hunter standing nearby swell with resentful jealousy. Hearing Jiyu reveal she was mixed race, Rex suddenly deflated, which made Hunter feel incredibly smug because his best friend had finally been put in his place. Rex did not hesitate to admit that Jiyu used Korean much more fluently than he did and continuously praised her reading and writing abilities. Jiyu flashed a gentle smile with radiant eyes and softly explained that the simple secret was just because she extremely loved reading books. Hunter was stunned to realize that every time she smiled, incredibly cute little dimples appeared on Jiyu's face. That beauty was like a sudden discovery, making it impossible for him to take his eyes off the gentle indentations on the little girl's rosy cheeks. However, a sudden surge of jealousy erupted, causing Hunter to punch the bed hard to release the surging frustration in his heart. He sulkily wondered why she could laugh and talk so happily with someone else like that, when there was clearly nothing worth joking about. Burying his face in his pillow in resentment, Hunter bitterly recalled the challenge that he would never beat his friends in Korean class. Though extremely annoyed, the young master had to admit a harsh truth that both of them were indeed slightly better at foreign languages than him. His hands tightly gripped the bedsheets as if forging an intense will to never be looked down upon ever again. Under the dim desk lamp in the middle of the night, Hunter silently and diligently studied, with a determination to surpass all rivals to assert himself. However, The image of Jiyu's radiant smile kept continuously appearing, becoming an obsession that gave his mind not a single minute of peace. Hunter sat silently in the dark and secretly resented Jiyu Parker for being so bold as to hide those dimples, only to let Rex see them before he did. Hunter silently admitted that thanks to Jiyu and Rex, his efforts in learning Korean finally reaped great results, making his grandfather extremely pleased. However, a feeling of frustration mixed with jealousy kept surging in his heart as Hunter had to witness Jiyu and his rival always sticking together. Amidst the luxurious space of the ball, the instructor announced that the dance class had officially begun and asked the couples to quickly take their positions. The teacher silently observed the group of three standing motionless in the center of the grand hall, seemingly calculating a very special arrangement for this performance. Contrary to normal rules, he suddenly announced that Jiyu would pair up with both boys to form an incredibly bizarre three-person dance group. Following the instructions, Rex quickly stepped forward and confidently placed his hand on Jiyu's waist, making the surrounding atmosphere suddenly more suffocating than ever. Although still stunned, Jiyu had to cooperate and place her hand on Rex's shoulder, trying to maintain the proper posture according to the instructor's strict requirements. On the opposite side, Hunter was forced to perform similar dance steps right from behind the girl, causing his face to harden due to the uncomfortable coercion. Hunter gritted his teeth in outrage, knowing he was no different from a tail following someone else, but he had to bite the bullet because the reward was a ticket to the prestigious U.S. Open Finals. He squeezed his eyes shut, reassuring himself to patiently overcome this challenge, because the ultimate goal was more important than the pride of a Hamilton young master. The image of a tennis racket appeared along with a narration about the luxurious value of front-row tickets, where spectators could witness every drop of sweat and clearly hear the athletes muttering. Hunter was stunned, his eyes wide with amazement, silently exclaiming that this was unbelievable and couldn't possibly be true. While guiding Jiyu, he couldn't help but feel annoyed seeing her display a bewildered face at the nonsense that the bastard Rex was intentionally whispering into her ear. Rex kept blabbering nonstop about the secret of the class's final dance always being a line dance to classic country music from an old record player. Rex's confession about secretly swapping the record to a hip-hop style made Jiyu unable to hold back a radiant, giggling laugh. Witnessing that smile, Hunter suddenly went blank as Jiyu's dimples appeared, something he had previously sworn he didn't care about at all. A strange feeling rushed over, making Hunter feel uncomfortably restless. He wondered why he had such an intense reaction to a mere smile. The awkward atmosphere was interrupted by the teacher's announcement, demanding that Lafayette and Hamilton immediately swap positions with each other. Waiting just for that, Hunter roughly shoved Rex aside to claim the spot in front of Jiyu, ignoring his rival's grumbling. Hunter decisively stepped right next to Jiyu with a highly possessive look, preparing for the approach he had craved from the very beginning. Hunter firmly placed his hand on Jiyu's waist, the solid hand of a tennis player seeming to assert absolute sovereignty right in front of his rival. He pulled her close to his chest, creating a breathtakingly close distance that left Jiyu standing stunned, staring into those deep blue eyes brimming with pressure. Being too tense from the unexpected touch, Jiyu awkwardly let her footsteps stumble over her dancing shoes and almost fell over. Hunter was startled to realize he had been too heavy-handed in his jealous fit, secretly regretting letting his emotions burst out and causing the little girl pain. Jiyu looked up at him with glittering, bewildered eyes, as if silently reproaching the incomprehensible roughness of the arrogant young master who was always so cold. That look made Hunter both embarrassed and resentful, silently comparing her gentleness when dancing with Rex to her fear right now. To ease the tension, he proactively held out his hand and coldly ordered her to place her hand on it to continue the dance steps. Jiyu stood motionless for a moment, her mind a mess as she watched his back, the white ribbon in her hair swaying gently to her rapid breathing. After a moment of hesitation, she timidly placed her small hand into the large waiting palm like a highly vulnerable compromise. Hunter slightly bowed his head to hide the chaotic emotions churning inside, trying to suppress his racing heartbeat to prepare for a stormy dance ahead. Hunter tightly interlaced his fingers with Jiyu's small hand, the spreading warmth dispelling the initial cold atmosphere. Amidst the flower-filled scenery, the two began their first dance steps, leaving Jiyu so stunned that she was speechless. Hunter suddenly felt flustered as he realized his body was heating up, his chest restless as if a fire was burning inside. He silently wondered if Jiyu's hand was naturally that small, or if his own hand had grown bizarrely fast. Jiyu's eyes were full of meekness, making Hunter suddenly freeze. It seemed all his previous prejudices about the skinny bookworm vanished. Feeling the warmth radiating from the small hands placed on his shoulders, the young master bewilderedly asked himself why that sensation was so intense. He looked at her with doubt, silently worrying and wondering if this little girl might be sick. In the quiet space, Jiyu's heartbeat suddenly fluttered, an unprecedentedly strange feeling creeping into her mind just like that. Hunter slightly turned his face away to hide his embarrassment, trying to deny the thought that this familiar girl looked incredibly strange today. He cleared his throat softly, asking her to focus on moving right now, and received an obedient confirmation of understanding from Jiyu. Hunter and Jiyu slowly spun to the music, the tall young master looking down at the little girl who was glancing up at him shyly. He decisively tightened his grip on Jiyu's waist, pulling her closer, as if wanting to assert absolute dominance in their shared dance. Contrary to his calm demeanor, Jiyu appeared extremely distracted with an anxious gaze, glancing over his shoulder full of unease. Her awkwardness made her footsteps lose control, her small white shoes on the verge of stepping right onto Hunter's feet. A soft cry rang out as Jiyu officially stepped on her dance partner's foot, causing the inherent rhythm to suddenly vanish in the middle of the hall. The little girl frantically blurted out an apology in panic, silently blaming herself for letting such a silly mistake happen right now. The rough stomp on Hunter's leather shoe created a half-crying, half-laughing situation, exposing the clumsiness of the typically timid girl. Hunter growled, demanding Jiyu focus on the dance, while simultaneously squeezing her trembling hands to regain stability. Jiyu bowed her head slightly, muttering another apology with a remorseful face. It seemed she was extremely afraid of bearing his anger. Hunter looked at her pale face and silently mocked that she was worrying too much, because those tiny sparrow-like feet could never actually make him feel pain. Hunter led Jiyu to spin in the middle of the dance hall but secretly felt annoyed, realizing she was noticeably clumsier compared to when she danced with his rival Rex. Childhood memories rushed back, making him bitterly admit that all along, Rex had always given the bookworm special gentleness and care. He stared into space with eyes burning with jealousy, constantly doubting whether the relationship between those two had truly exceeded the bounds of friendship. A surging feeling of disgust made Hunter's face harden. He fiercely denied the uncomfortable reality manifesting right before his eyes. Suddenly, a forceful punch landed squarely on Hunter's shoulder along with a highly provocative call, completely cutting off his train of thought. Rex appeared with a triumphant look. He loudly mocked that Hunter had been too engrossed in thought to notice the music had changed, ordering him to get out of the way. The Lafayette young master didn't hesitate to shove his rival aside to seize the spot, decisively declaring that it was now his turn to guide Lady Jiyu's steps. Rex smirked meaningfully upon catching his best friend's flustered expression, secretly gloating that his teasing plan had achieved initial success. He leaned close to Jiyu's ear to seek agreement, then challenged her to ask Hunter directly if she still harbored any intentions of doubting what he had just said. Hunter stood rooted to the spot with a bewildered face. He was completely lost and couldn't possibly understand the suggestive words the bastard Rex had just uttered. Jiyu stood frozen, looking at the tall figure in front of her. Her light brown eyes flashed with amazement when facing the invisible pressure from the young master. Amidst that suffocating atmosphere, an announcement echoed across the hall that this was the final song, asking all couples to quickly switch dance partners. Rex sauntered over with a forced smile on his lips. He awkwardly called Olivia's name with the intention of inviting her for a dance before the ceremony ended. However, Hunter glared warningly, silently asserting in his heart that he still had important matters to clear up with Jiyu, so he ordered the annoying guy to get lost immediately. Seeing Rex still hesitating to offer a soft proposal to dance with Jiyu, the blue veins on Hunter's forehead bulged due to his uncontrollable rage. His ocean blue eyes flashed a sharp, cold light, decisively chasing his best friend away, making Rex so terrified that he didn't dare to utter another word. After successfully chasing away the spoilsport, Hunter coldly turned to look at the bookworm Jiyu, who was standing dazed with dozens of question marks popping up in her head. He decisively grabbed her tiny hand, forcing Jiyu to begin this final dance under his highly possessive lead. While their footsteps still rhythmically shifted, Hunter's mind was in turmoil with the thought of whether asking Jiyu directly about her relationship with Rex right now would be a weird move. Unexpectedly, hearing Jiyu softly call his name in doubt, Hunter was jolted out of his train of thought and coldly asked back what she wanted to say. Jiyu hesitated, intending to say something but then stopped, making the atmosphere between them suddenly full of restlessness. She slightly bowed her head to avoid his sharp gaze, hastily explaining that it was just some trivial matter not worth mentioning. Hunter looked at the little girl's blushing face, silently wondering if she was feeling hot, and then pressed for the reason why she had fallen so silent. Despite Jiyu's denial, Hunter still appeared incredibly annoyed, silently demanding she tell the truth instead of constantly making him worry. After a moment of tough psychological struggle, Jiyu gathered all her courage to prepare to ask a question she had wondered about for a long time. Faced with the young master's impatient urging, Jiyu startled and trembled but still managed to utter his name to begin her confession. Under the shimmering lights, Jiyu unexpectedly asked Hunter straight out if he was harboring special feelings for her, leaving him completely stunned. The massive psychological shock made Hunter lose control of his footsteps. He accidentally stomped extremely hard on Jiyu's white shoes. Jiyu cried out in miserable pain, causing Hunter to frantically hold her tight, his face clearly showing a mix of bewilderment and regret for his clumsiness. Amidst the tormenting physical pain, Jiyu's mind still couldn't stop reeling, wondering if an arrogant jerk like Hunter could actually like her. Hunter shouted, asking Jiyu if she had gone crazy to dare think that someone like him would develop feelings for her. A suffocating feeling surrounded him, making him feel as humiliated as losing a tennis match completely, while Jiyu could only stand silently with her face flushed from embarrassment. The young master gritted his teeth and spat out his hatred for this dance class, which was actually to cover up the surging embarrassment in his heart. Looking into her astonished eyes, Hunter coldly asserted that he hated Jiyu Parker more than anything else in the world. Finishing his words, he decisively turned his back and walked away coldly, leaving the little girl standing all alone in the middle of the hall with a broken heart. Rex awkwardly approached and then curiously asked Jiyu where that troublemaker had disappeared to right when the ceremony was about to end. Jiyu sobbed in tears and begged her friend not to mention it again, because Hunter had just declared that he utterly despised her presence. Witnessing the situation, Rex sighed wearily and silently cursed Hunter for being a moron who couldn't understand the opportunities he had deliberately set up. The gloomy atmosphere was suddenly ripped apart by an extremely loud noise that made Jiyu jump in terror, not understanding what was happening. Rebellious hip-hop melodies exploded from the old speakers, turning the once solemn hall into a chaotic scene amidst everyone's astonishment. The old butler was stunned when he realized the rebellious hip-hop track was echoing across the luxurious hall instead of the traditional classical melody. He panicked and ordered the music turned off immediately while the crowd of teenagers began dancing wildly, ignoring the solemnity of the ceremony. Amidst that uproar, Jiyu just stood silently with her back turned to the whole world, her shoulders trembling slightly from the pain she had just endured. A teardrop silently fell to the floor, marking a bitter end to the first ball with less than pleasant memories. 2 months after that fateful dance, the scene shifted to a math tutoring class every Wednesday afternoon in a skyscraper. The relationship between Hunter and Jiyu at this point was no different from a freezing winter. Both were imprisoned in a suffocating cold war. Jiyu clutched the folder in her hand, trying to maintain a calm facade to hide the inner turmoil when having to sit next to the young master. Hunter sneakily glanced over at the girl beside him, his deep blue eyes flashing a complex look mixed with a bit of indescribable restlessness. When Jiyu was about to stand up and leave, Hunter suddenly spoke up, saying they needed to talk to clear up all the lingering misunderstandings. Hunter looked straight at her and called Jiyu Parker's name with a highly serious face, as if he had made up his mind to face the truth. Hunter, sitting behind the desk, called out to Jiyu, asserting that he had something extremely important to tell her right now. Jiyu slightly curled her lip bitterly, silently affirming she already knew his intentions and made up her mind to retaliate against his long-standing hatred with a rejection. She remained standing with her back to him, coldly urging him to get straight to the point because she didn't have the time to stand there bickering any longer. Hunter slammed his hands down on the desk in deep frustration, trying to suppress the surging wrath at the little girl's unexpectedly indifferent attitude. He stood up to face Jiyu, pressing her with a highly doubtful tone if she truly didn't know what he was about to beg for. Jiyu silently despised the young master's arrogance of never willing to humble himself, then casually demanded to leave and do her homework if he continued to stay silent. Hunter's face darkened in outrage, his deep blue eyes full of aggression glued to her as if wanting to scorch the space. Just as Jiyu was about to step away, Hunter decisively stopped her and growled, asking where she planned to run off to when this conversation wasn't over yet. Hunter lowered his voice to mention the important match coming up this Friday, not forgetting to emphasize that this was his first time participating in a prestigious Level 1 tournament. He looked straight into her eyes full of pressure, loudly asking Jiyu if she truly understood the extremely important meaning of this national-level tournament to his career. Jiyu admitted she knew well about Hunter's illustrious achievements because her mother constantly praised his UDR score and his standing in the junior championship, but she coldly retorted, asking what all that glory had to do with her, when her mind right now only wanted to leave as quickly as possible. Hunter suddenly blushed in embarrassment, proactively holding out his hand and unexpectedly demanding Jiyu perform the lucky kiss like a familiar ritual. Looking at that hand, the little girl silently thought about the invisible hierarchy that had existed between them since childhood, the thing that always forced her to submissively obey. However, this time Jiyu made up her mind not to lower herself so easily anymore. She looked straight into his eyes and decisively blurted out a refusal. Hunter sighed awkwardly, pressing to ask if she was still resentful over the excessive words from last time, then spoke up to scold Jiyu for being childish. Just as Jiyu was about to argue that he was the one who started all the weirdness, Hunter grabbed her wrist forcefully, as quick as a flash. He tightly held Jiyu's small hand, his deep blue eyes flashing a resolute look mixed with possessiveness that gave her no way to escape. Under the undeniable pressure, Jiyu had to bow her head and perform the kiss on Hunter's palm, completing the agonizing amulet ritual between the two of them. Just finishing the kiss, Jiyu angrily shouted to ask if Hunter was satisfied yet, then decisively turned her back and walked away, not bothering to pay attention to the young master's attitude for another second. Jiyu threatened to scream loudly if Hunter dared to block her way, simultaneously ordering the Hamilton young master to step aside immediately. Leaving the tutoring class, her small silhouette walked alone under the sunset enveloping the ancient architecture. Even though her legs were still trembling because it was her first time daring to raise her voice at Hunter, Jiyu secretly admitted the feeling was great, although she feared she would be expelled. She worried about the expensive tuition fees she couldn't afford if she lost the favor and discount from Lady Lauren. The image of her ambitious mother appeared, making Jiyu heavy-hearted, because she would surely break down if her daughter could no longer frequent the Hamilton mansion. Standing from afar looking toward the treehouse full of memories, Jiyu bitterly thought that Hunter must hate her more than ever right now. Her small hands tightly clutched the document folder to her chest as a way to try and control the unstable emotions churning in her heart. However, reality was even harsher when at the tournament in Chicago, Hunter had to taste the most bitter defeat in his tennis career. Jiyu silently sat in front of the computer, her finger lightly clicking the mouse to search for information about his match results with an anxious mood. She numbly covered her mouth with her hand in astonishment seeing Hunter's score plummeting, as if he had completely let go and given up all efforts. Jiyu silently recalled Hunter's fierce playing style, someone who always fought tenaciously until the last minute even if he had to accept defeat. Yet she couldn't help but be stunned looking at the disastrous scoreboard on the computer screen, showing Hunter had just lost to a low-ranked opponent by a huge margin. Right at that moment, the phone on the desk suddenly vibrated with an abrupt message from Hunter, demanding she must be present at the treehouse immediately. Although she still had many unresolved feelings after the rough words from last time, Jiyu silently prepared to leave with a sorrowful face, mixed with a bit of anxiety. Under the quiet night, the harsh sounds of a ball hitting continuously echoed from the treehouse, making the atmosphere extremely tense. Jiyu stood silently observing. She could feel Hunter's frantic wrath through every hit, as if wanting to smash everything around to vent his anger. She silently thought the young master must be going through feelings of extreme insecurity and absolute rage right now after the most humiliating defeat in his career. The timid footsteps on the paved path silently blamed herself for coming here, because she truly did not want to face Hunter when he was losing control. Suddenly, Hunter's deep, authoritative voice rang out, decisively calling Jiyu Parker's name and ordering her to stop right where she was. Jiyu was stunned to realize his voice seemed to have become much deeper and more mature, making her just want to immediately run away from this terrifying pressure. Jiyu's footsteps stopped heavily in front of Hunter. Even though her reason affirmed his defeat was not her fault, guilt still enveloped her mind. In the tense atmosphere at the treehouse, Jiyu timidly asked the reason she was called over, only to silently regret not performing the lucky kiss more properly for him earlier. However, Hunter poured cold water on her by coldly declaring that Jiyu Parker was no longer the amulet helping him win the championship. Facing that harsh assertion, Jiyu could only look up at him in shock and retort if that was the only reason he called her here. Hunter's face twisted with anger, his blue eyes burning. He bitterly admitted that begging her before every match was an incredibly pathetic act. Jiyu's eyes wavered violently upon hearing Hunter decisively state he didn't need her anymore, an assertion that seemed to cut off all the connecting threads they had all this time. Hunter's hand clenched firmly as he spat out the cruel words that to him right now, she wasn't an amulet or anything else. She was nothing at all. The words "nothing at all" echoed in her mind, leaving Jiyu dead silent. She numbly wondered if her position in his heart all this time was truly just nothingness. Jiyu squeezed her eyes shut in extreme pain. She silently blamed herself for worrying and feeling guilty, only to trudge all the way here just to receive this harshness. Overcoming the pain, Jiyu coldly replied that it was good, making Hunter inevitably stunned and blurting out a question in shock at her attitude. Jiyu wiped away the rolling tears, gloomily declaring that she felt truly relieved to no longer have to participate in his ridiculous and troublesome amulet joke from now on. Hunter stood rooted to the spot with a stunned face, silently looking at the girl in front of him who seemingly just shed the burden she had carried for so long. Hunter's throat tightened painfully. He swallowed slightly in extreme confusion upon seeing Jiyu become so decisive and strong for the first time. Under the dim lights, Jiyu silently turned away to hide the shattering inside. A belated teardrop fell softly, marking the end of her endurance. Not letting him react, Jiyu decisively turned and walked away despite Hunter numbly calling her name in belated remorse. Her small back walked away alone, Jiyu leaving a message wishing him to become better instead of constantly drowning in baseless illusions. Standing before the treehouse full of memories, Jiyu coldly demanded he stop blaming lucky amulets, and especially never to use her as an excuse for his failures ever again. Each step of hers walking away from this place became lighter. Jiyu secretly felt lucky she had been able to maintain an unexpectedly calm voice in front of him. The treehouse sank into silent darkness, witnessing the bitter final meeting between two people who had been attached throughout their childhoods. Hunter still stood foolishly with a dazed look, making Jiyu secretly astonished and feeling truly strange that she was the one who left him speechless like that. Jiyu squeezed her heart tight, silently lamenting that the painful feeling and distance between them had never been as bad as it was right now. Meanwhile, Hunter stood silently stunned, only managing to blurt out the name Jiyu before her silhouette completely disappeared into the distance. That moment made Jiyu realize in shock that this was the very first time he called her name so respectfully and meaningfully. The relationship between the two fell into a prolonged state of tension longer than expected. Although they still attended math tutoring sessions together, the space was left with nothing but silence. Throughout the winter semester of 6th grade, they treated each other like strangers, completely ignoring each other's existence without exchanging a single word. When spring knocked on the door, it was also the time the tennis season officially began. Jiyu silently noticed Hunter's frequent absences from school due to continuous matches. During family meals, Jiyu's mother constantly sighed in worry upon hearing Hunter was falling into a crisis. He even smashed his racket at the recent tournament. Jiyu could only quietly nibble on her dinner, her mind in turmoil upon hearing that the once arrogant rival had sunk deep into a losing streak lasting over 6 months. By mid-June, right as summer break began, Hunter decided to leave New York to attend a prestigious tennis training camp in the south of France. It wasn't until mid-August that he officially returned to New York and spent the rest of the break at his family's Hamptons estate. Jiyu was stunned when she caught sight of the suitcase being pulled in, signaling the return of the Hamilton family after a long vacation. Just returning after the Labor Day holiday, Hunter appeared with an indifferent face and a sharp, deeply distant gaze. Escaping into her own world, Jiyu sat with her knees hugged to her chest on the bed, trying to find peace again through familiar pages. However, an abrupt message from Hunter suddenly appeared on the screen, ordering her to be at the treehouse before 4 p.m. Rage erupted, making Jiyu throw her phone hard onto the bed. She resentfully thought she wasn't a pet for him to boss around at will. She silently cursed his flippancy when his own mouth had once declared the amulet was meaningless and he didn't need her anymore. The pages flipped hurriedly, but her mind was completely agitated. His arrogance was like a ghost haunting the room. The blue alarm clock ticked endlessly, counting down every fateful second, inching towards the highly pressurized number 4. Jiyu's eyes clearly showed a fierce internal struggle. She wondered if she should once again succumb to this imposition. The ticking sound of the clock hands felt like it was suffocating the space, signaling the final deadline for the little girl's decision had officially struck. Jiyu decisively slammed the half-read book shut. The harsh sound echoed like how she wanted to end the entanglement with that arrogant young master. Sitting on the bed with a tired face, she silently thought that the whole summer of distance seemed to have made her heart less pained and angry compared to before. Even though she really wanted to rest comfortably, Jiyu still reluctantly walked to the closet, sighing at the thought of having to change clothes to go meet him. She rummaged through the pile of clothes with a highly confused mood, constantly questioning Hunter's true intentions for unexpectedly calling her out right now. Standing dazedly in front of the mirror, Jiyu questioned herself if she really needed to dress up to face the person who just recently declared he didn't need her anymore. Looking at her simple loungewear consisting of a camisole and pink shorts, the little girl started hatching a plan of silent rebellion against the imposition. Because her pride was hurt, Jiyu decided to keep her current appearance to go meet him. She silently asserted she wouldn't waste any more effort because of him. Timid footsteps led her across the quiet hallway. Jiyu glanced at the watch and realized she was about 10 minutes late compared to the request. Upon arriving at the treehouse, she saw Hunter already waiting with a somber look. Jiyu secretly resolved to turn back immediately if he dared to get angry over this tardiness. Standing opposite her childhood friend, Jiyu kept a cold expression in her comfortable outfit, ready to face whatever storm was about to happen. Hunter silently observed Jiyu, his eyes hiding an indescribable stirring after a long time apart. He paused slightly, sweat breaking out on his neck, as he felt the strangely unfamiliar presence of the little girl right in front of him. Jiyu silently marveled that after a long time no see, he seemed to have grown much taller with the physique of a real man. Hunter slowly stepped closer, creating an invisible pressure that no longer carried a harsh or arrogant vibe like before. He cleared his throat awkwardly, then held out a carefully wrapped gift while softly muttering a deeply sincere apology. Jiyu was stunned to realize it was her favorite sci-fi novel, silently moved because he still remembered her preferences. That gift was incredibly special as it was a first edition from 1979, complete with the author's priceless handwritten signature right on the first page. Bursting with happiness, Jiyu could only cover her mouth with her hand in amazement, feeling a warm aura wrapping around her soul. She choked up, hugging the book tightly to her chest and looking up at Hunter with teary eyes, letting her first stirrings of love gradually erase all resentment. Witnessing her reaction, Hunter gently broke into a soft smile with a flushed face, officially marking the end of the cold period between the two of them. Jiyu was flustered standing before Hunter's gift. She silently understood that accepting it meant she would once again become his lucky amulet. Even knowing the troubles ahead, Jiyu still couldn't resist this meaningful gift. She nodded slightly in thanks while Hunter humbled his ego for the first time in 7 long years. Instead of an olive branch of peace, he chose a clumsily wrapped book to serve as a bridge, helping both officially reconcile right before entering 7th grade. The return of the Jiyu amulet helped Hunter regain his brilliant form, helping him proudly seize the U14 Junior Championship in Chicago highly convincingly. Time slipped away until the spring semester of 7th grade, when heavy rains began to disrupt outdoor physical education classes. The entire school was immersed in a gray curtain of rain, forcing students to relocate all activities into the massive central gymnasium area. Whenever outdoor sports were canceled due to the weather, Jiyu would silently walk through the gym doors to prepare for the substitute indoor class. This was a shared sports complex for both Astor and Alton schools, where a large crowd of students was gathering on the bleachers. Because she was busy finishing her year-end project, Jiyu arrived late. She timidly sneaked into line and silently prayed her tardiness wouldn't be noticed. Just sitting down on the bleachers, Jiyu looked around blankly and wondered why everyone was sitting so silently. Perhaps there was some special class today. In today's safety and survival class, the teacher began explaining vital signs and how to check the body's reactions in emergency situations. Jiyu silently observed from the bleachers, secretly wondering if this was a continuation of the first aid and CPR lesson she had learned last semester. However, an unexpected movement made Jiyu startle in terror, her eyes clearly showing panic, as if she had just felt a wave of pressure approaching. Decisive footsteps echoed on the floor, a pair of stylish black and white sneakers gliding forward with full confidence and pride. The feeling of having her personal space invaded made Jiyu tremble and shrink back, while the surrounding students began whispering about the newcomer's identity. Jiyu's heart almost stopped beating as she was stunned to realize the person who had just approached right next to her was none other than Hunter Hamilton. Right at that moment, the teacher decisively ordered Hamilton to sit down at the end of the row, unintentionally creating a fateful arrangement right next to Jiyu. Hunter coldly plopped down beside the little girl, creating a suffocatingly silent atmosphere enveloping two people who had so many past entanglements. Despite Hunter's apathy, a friend still excitedly greeted him and gave a friendly high five to welcome the young master's presence. Finally, Sienna Reed, with her radiant blonde hair, also turned around and flashed a bright smile to greet Hunter, making the atmosphere in the gym even more dramatic. Hunter and Jiyu sat closely side by side on the bleachers, creating an unexpected contact that left the little girl utterly bewildered and extremely tense. The Hamilton young master maintained a cold expression and a distant gaze, seemingly trying to suppress the chaotic emotions surging inside. Jiyu slightly turned her head with trembling eyes, clearly feeling the warmth from the person sitting next to her spreading and suffocating her mind. Deep down, Jiyu silently admitted that she felt extremely awkward, having not foreseen that they would have to face each other at such a close distance. She scrambled to look for Chloe's silhouette all over the gym, hoping her best friend's appearance would rescue her from the current wave of pressure. Amidst the crowded bleachers, Jiyu sat shrunk back in isolation while Sienna Reed in the distance was also lost in calculating thoughts. Sienna threw a sharp, cold, and mysterious look at her rival, signaling the underlying storms about to erupt between the two girls. The tension reached its peak, making Jiyu startle in terror, her eyes widening obsessively as if trying to escape from the suffocating reality. The safety and survival class shifted to the practical part as the pulse assessment sheet was passed around to Jiyu's seat. Jiyu attentively listened to the lecture about the locations of arteries lying just beneath the skin, trying to use the new knowledge to dispel the distractions enveloping her mind. Jiyu sat dazedly on the bleachers, silently observing Hunter's and Sienna's silhouettes from behind while casting her eyes around for her best friend Chloe. She silently told herself that her relationship with Hunter was nothing shady, so Sienna wouldn't be suspicious, as she truly didn't want to end up miserably like Beatrice. The haunting memory of last winter returned. That was when Sienna decisively cut off her 8-year friendship with Beatrice following a scandalous incident from a secret party. Taking advantage of her parents' long business trips, Beatrice had secretly hosted lavish parties and gradually became notorious in the private school student community. The word-of-mouth invitations were reserved only for the most prominent faces of the 7th grade, creating an exclusive event that every kid craved to attend. Despite being labeled a secret, just after one night, countless sensitive rumors about kissing penalties or illicit romances spread like wildfire across the Upper East Side. Beatrice, who trained at the same tennis academy as Hunter, had proactively approached him at the bus stop on the way to the practice court. The blue bus stop sign stood silently amidst the city streets, witnessing the beginning of a highly calculated scheme aimed at the Hamilton young master. She sneakily dropped an invitation for Hunter to join the secret party behind Sienna's back, not forgetting to flash a suggestive smile in hopes of dragging him into her game. However, Hunter coldly rejected that ridiculous invitation, declaring that he was extremely busy training for an important tournament over the weekend. The students standing nearby accidentally overheard the conversation and immediately started frantically texting, spreading the rumor at breakneck speed. In a split second, the entire 7th grade had heard that Beatrice was harshly rejected by Hunter right to her face, making her completely break down amidst the mocking words. That incident became a steely warning to anyone intending to get close to Hunter, making Jiyu still shudder, even though a semester had passed. Now, poor Beatrice could only hang around the group of friends she once despised, an overly steep price for daring to challenge Sienna's power. Jiyu slightly glanced at the young master sitting next to her, secretly feeling relieved because he naturally didn't care about anything other than tennis, not even Sienna. However, the prospect of Hunter dating a girl other than Sienna appeared like a tragedy, where frantic jealousy would scorch everything. A chilling sensation running down her spine made Jiyu secretly feel sorry for whoever caught Hunter's eye, because she knew Sienna's terrifying true colors all too well. The safety class returned to reality when the teacher asked about the most effective location to check the pulse of an unconscious person, making the whole class buzz with opinions. The teacher smiled and explained that blood circulates throughout the body, so every answer made sense. But in an emergency situation, prioritizing checks on exposed skin areas is the most optimal method. The teacher decisively ordered the whole class to start pairing up with the person sitting right next to them to perform the practical pulse-taking exercise for 1 minute. Jiyu was so stunned, she was speechless upon realizing that twisted fate had forced her to practice with the arrogant young master Hunter. Amidst the confusion, her best friend Chloe unexpectedly called Olivia's name, making Jiyu startle and turn around with a faint glimmer of hope for a rescue. Chloe softly announced that Sienna was offering to swap seats with Jiyu, a proposal that seemed to be the most wonderful lifeline right now. Jiyu's face lit up with joy. She was about to step forward and ask Mr. Hawkins for permission to change partners to escape the suffocating atmosphere. Yet Hunter raised his hand as quick as a flash and loudly questioned the teacher whether switching partners was allowed or not. Right after the steely veto answer from the teacher, Hunter coldly demanded both of them to quickly start the practical exercise according to the rules. He demanded Jiyu give him her wrist to check first if she was still hesitating, creating a highly forced contact. Jiyu was trembling with anger. She looked straight into his deep blue eyes and pressed for the reason why he intentionally ruined the seat-swapping plan. Hunter lightly closed his eyes in exhaustion and bluntly declared that Sienna was incredibly annoying and he would rather work with her than have to face that girl. Jiyu silently turned her face away, secretly asking herself if she truly wasn't annoying in his eyes like he said. Hunter showed impatience and demanded she stop being difficult and hand over her wrist so he could begin the practical exercise. The young master's firm fingers lightly touched her fragile skin, starting to measure the pulse with full concentration. Jiyu silently observed him from a close angle, secretly confessing a secret about him that she had never revealed. She couldn't help but feel jealous of Hunter's healthy tan skin, which made him always exude an elegant and vibrant aura. The wandering thoughts made her wonder why her mother was always so obsessed with keeping her skin this pale. Jiyu suddenly remembered the reason she used to want brown skin was because Hunter once mocked her for looking white and translucent like a spring roll. Hunter suddenly looked straight into her eyes with an extremely serious expression and pressed to ask if her heart was actually beating. Jiyu froze with a lifeless face and dull eyes, silently feeling speechless at the incomprehensible weirdness of the friend sitting next to her. She decisively swatted his hand away and retorted, asking what nonsense he was spouting because it made absolutely no logical sense. Jiyu silently thought perhaps the calluses on his hands from training had made Hunter lose his refined sense of touch, or simply he was being impatient as usual. Fragmented childhood memories rushed back as proof that Hunter had never been good at paying attention to minor details, and patience was always a luxury for him. Hunter unexpectedly narrowed the distance and demanded Jiyu look closely at the spot he was pointing at so she could verify the actual heartbeat herself. Faced with Jiyu's bewilderment, the young master slightly mocked her, calling her an idiot, and once again affirmed the exact location that needed to be checked right here. Not letting her react in time, Hunter suddenly moved close and grabbed Jiyu's hand, forcing her to directly face the strong wave of pressure emanating from his body. Their breaths almost intertwined in the hair's breadth distance. Jiyu was stunned as the scent of pine wood and lavender on him began to invade her mind. Even though her heart was beating erratically, Jiyu's reason still managed to recognize that it was the scent from the luxury laundry detergent costing hundreds of dollars a box that the Hamiltons often used. Hunter slightly smirked with a highly arrogant smile, then threw a teasing remark that it turned out she was still alive and not completely frozen to death like he thought. Finishing his sarcastic words, he indifferently turned his back to look towards the electronic scoreboard to check the time, leaving Jiyu still stunned and unable to gather her wits. Brushing off the distraction, Jiyu began to focus on the practical exercise, her lips moving slightly as she counted each of Hunter's pulse beats with a serious and cautious gaze. Jiyu dazedly turned her face away, trying to keep a calm demeanor to hide the stirrings quietly creeping into her mind. She couldn't help but be stunned looking at Hunter's hands measuring her pulse, silently wondering how much taller this young master planned to get. Even though her hands weren't small, when enveloped by his possessive grip, Jiyu felt she suddenly became as tiny as a child. Hunter's sharp eyes were highly focused. His silence only made the surrounding atmosphere thicker and more pressurized. The firm fingers gently brushed over her fragile wrist, a delicate touch that made the little girl's heart start to lose control. Hunter patiently pressed his fingertips harder to clearly feel the beat. His absolute focus made Jiyu unable to take her eyes off him. Jiyu's face flushed with deep embarrassment as she silently observed the opponent's highly masculine back of the hand, a beauty she had never paid attention to before. She suddenly regretted not paying attention to these details when performing the hand kiss that year, only for these new vibrations to rush in just like that now. Sitting closely side by side amidst the crowded bleachers, Jiyu silently lamented why just one short minute of practice could feel so agonizingly long. Hunter coldly recorded the pulse result as 81 and commented it was quite weak, making Jiyu inevitably stunned and questioning her own condition. Hunter explained that her pulse was so weak it made it hard for him to feel, even though he had tried to focus as intensely as when executing a tennis serve. Jiyu numbly wondered if she was truly sick, when the persistent knee joint pains were often brushed off by her mother as a sign of growing up. Suddenly, Hunter decisively called Jiyu Parker's name, then proactively grabbed her hand forcefully to shatter the enveloping silence. The Hamilton young master ordered her to start checking his pulse immediately with a highly challenging and domineering expression. Jiyu softly uttered her agreement, then timidly followed the demand, striving to hide the fluster waiting to erupt in her heart at this contact. Her fragile fingers were gently placed on Hunter's wrist, beginning to clearly feel the subtle vibrations from his side. An authentic sensation transmitted over, making Jiyu secretly exclaim that she had felt the heartbeat. Her initial anxiety suddenly vanished completely. She realized Hunter's pulse was also full of life and as strong as his personality, while the time on the electronic scoreboard kept steadily ticking away. Jiyu attentively recorded the number 84 on the assessment sheet, silently affirming that the physique of the young master sitting next to her was truly extremely healthy and impressive. Looking at Hunter's arrogant, triumphant face, Jiyu could only sigh and silently think that he would never concede to her even in the most trivial matters. Jiyu slightly pulled up her sleeve to prepare for the arm pulse measurement practice, her mind still lingering slightly on wandering thoughts. Suddenly, Hunter grabbed her arm highly decisively, making Jiyu inevitably jump in terror at this excessively unexpected contact. The Hamilton young master stared intently at her arm with a stern face, while Jiyu started feeling resentful at his weird attitude. Hunter loudly questioned why she didn't have even a little bit of muscle on her arm, making Jiyu only blush and retort what that had to do with the lesson. He gave her soft bicep a light squeeze, then commented that it felt mushy like pudding, making an angry Jiyu order him to quickly finish the check. Faced with her resistance, Hunter suddenly became embarrassed. He ran a hand through his hair to try and hide the fluster clearly visible on his face. His deep blue eyes wavered slightly as he looked straight at Jiyu. It seemed he was struggling intensely internally to maintain his usual calm demeanor. The distance between the two suddenly narrowed, creating a spark of electricity that made the surrounding atmosphere extremely suffocating and dramatic. Hunter blushed slightly, then decisively turned away. He cleared his throat and said he would start measuring the pulse, while Jiyu could only nod silently in agreement. The young master's firm hand gripped her arm to count each pulse beat, officially starting a minute of practice fraught with the first stirrings of love. Jiyu squeezed her eyes shut in embarrassment, silently lamenting that 1 minute of practice right now felt even longer than the previous pulse measurement. Hunter quietly observed the little girl's reaction before announcing his steady pulse rate of 91 with medium intensity. The young master cleared his throat softly to dispel the suffocating atmosphere, though his deep blue eyes could not hide an unusual stir of emotion. Immediately, he decisively rolled up his sleeves and ordered Jiyu to quickly take her turn checking his pulse to end the lesson. Facing Hunter's sharp, pressured gaze, Jiyu could only softly murmur her agreement in a state of extreme tension and anxiety. She looked up at her childhood friend with eyes full of hesitation, trying to regain her last bit of composure in the face of his dominance. Jiyu's tiny hands timidly touched Hunter's solid bicep, a physical contact that instantly threw them both into an eerily quiet state. Hunter's face suddenly flushed red with embarrassment. He frowned awkwardly as he clearly felt the warmth from her delicate fingers. Jiyu tried to press down hard on the firm muscle, while Hunter unconsciously clenched his fist, making the situation even more intense. His stiffness startled Jiyu. She asked Hunter to stop flexing his arm because she completely couldn't press down to find his pulse. A loud heartbeat echoed as Hunter swallowed softly, trying to suppress the surging emotion from the little girl's touch. The young master unexpectedly grabbed her wrist, causing Jiyu to cry out in pain as she was unprepared for this overly sudden contact. Hunter irritably mocked that she was tickling him and demanded that Jiyu press down hard instead of acting like she was scratching an itch. Jiyu let out a soft exclamation of excitement when she finally found the pulse point on Hunter's firm bicep, striving to complete the practical exercise. The burning heat from the touch made Hunter grit his teeth, questioning why the air in the gymnasium had suddenly become so hot and stuffy. Shock was clearly visible on Jiyu's face as she announced that his pulse had jumped to 98, throwing them both into a state of confusion. Hunter coldly denied this abnormal change, asserting that he hadn't engaged in any vigorous exercise in order to hide the inner turmoil in his heart. Faced with his skepticism, Jiyu firmly insisted that she was only telling the truth about the palpitations she had just felt on his body. A sudden burst of anger made Hunter demand that she drop the nonsense and quickly check his neck area so they could end this dramatic class. Finally, Jiyu gently brushed her hair back to reveal her sensitive, fair neck, preparing for an ambiguous touch and the imminent eruption of first love thrills. Hunter suddenly froze, his deep blue eyes widening in astonishment while his face gradually flushed red from a strange, surging emotion. Amidst the faint floral scent in the air, Jiyu's delicate strands of hair swayed slightly, creating a silent tremor that conquered the young master's mind. Hunter leaned in close, his hand abruptly stopping midair as he was about to touch her neck, causing the surrounding atmosphere to suddenly become suffocatingly quiet. Gathering all his courage, he gently used his fingers to brush a messy lock of Jiyu's hair aside, a tender yet possessive gesture that caught the little girl completely off guard. Jiyu's eyes widened in sheer shock. Her heart seemed to skip a beat at the unexpectedly overly intimate action from him. Immediately, she decisively swatted that hand away in panic, leaving Hunter completely stunned, not understanding what was happening. An explosion of anger mixed with embarrassment made Hunter yell out, questioning why she was reacting so harshly, ignoring the curious stares directed at them. Jiyu tightly clutched her neck with a face flushed from embarrassment. She urgently pleaded with him to be quiet immediately because everyone around was watching them. Hunter scowled and looked around with the sulky expression of a child. He silently and angrily wondered what on earth those people were staring at that made the mood so gloomy. Glancing over at Jiyu, he silently mocked that their gazes were not laser beams and she didn't need to be so terrified as to become such a coward. Hunter sighed, silently wondering if Jiyu was so introverted that she couldn't bear the stares of others. When the teacher announced there were only 5 minutes left, both were forced to brush aside their awkwardness to quickly finish the practical exercise. Hunter decisively placed his hand on Jiyu's neck and pressed down, silently commanding that they had no time left and must check the carotid pulse right away. The young master's firm hand pressed against her fair skin, creating a silent collision that caused the surrounding space to suddenly thicken. However, Hunter suddenly paused with a bewildered look, as he seemed to feel something abnormal from her pulse. He was shocked to realize that red finger marks were deeply imprinted on Jiyu's neck, silently asking himself just how much force he had actually used. The young master hastily bowed his head in remorse, sweat pouring down his forehead as he worried that he had accidentally hurt the little girl. Under the gymnasium lights, Hunter's highly masculine side profile appeared with wavering eyes, hiding the emotional stirrings that had just ignited. The hands that were only used to the stiff grip of a tennis racket were now trembling before the incredible fragility of the girl sitting next to him. Hunter once again reached out to lightly touch Jiyu's neck, his gesture now much gentler, like a silent apology for his initial roughness. Hunter unexpectedly tightened his grip while taking the pulse, making Jiyu cry out in panic, demanding to know what he was trying to do. The girl flushed beet red from an irresistible ticklish feeling, immediately brushing Hunter's hand away and insisting on doing it herself. The young master gritted his teeth in extreme confusion, silently wondering what outrageous thing he had done to make her so embarrassed. Hunter glanced at Jiyu with deeply agitated eyes, silently thinking that this ambiguous situation could easily make people mistakenly believe they had just kissed. He breathed a soft sigh of relief when he finally pinpointed the exact location of her wildly beating pulse. Jiyu shyly used her finger to point at the sensitive spot on her neck, gently signaling to Hunter that the exact location was right there. Hunter asked her to maintain the posture and wait patiently for another minute to complete the practical exercise. Jiyu had to close her eyes tight, resigning herself to the close contact, and softly voiced her agreement despite being extremely nervous inside. Watching her small, trembling figure, Hunter secretly felt he was no different from a villain forcing himself on someone else. Young Master Hamilton silently felt the situation was truly unfair to him, even though he still couldn't shake off these strange vibes. Jiyu always tried to appear mature and calm, but Hunter yearned to see her vulnerable expression when those eyes were filled with tears. The cold and distant gaze from young Master Hamilton's ocean blue eyes seemed to want to swallow up all resistance. He secretly compared the desire to bully Jiyu Parker to the same euphoric feeling as the moment of winning a final match. When his hand touched her delicate skin, Hunter was silently amazed by Jiyu's thinness, realizing she was even smaller than he had imagined. The little girl's pale and fragile appearance as she sat next to him made Hunter's possessive instinct suddenly rise up fiercely. The young master silently realized that today's Jiyu seemed to carry an unfamiliar, captivating charm that he couldn't quite name. Hunter announced her pulse was 102, causing a bewildered Jiyu to ask again if he was sure he had checked it correctly. Deep down, he smirked inwardly, thinking that no matter what, the timid girl in front of him would always be the Jiyu Parker he knew. The atmosphere suddenly turned serious as Hunter coldly reminded Jiyu that it was now her turn to do the practical part. Young Master Hamilton decisively pointed at the pulse point on his neck and ordered her to start checking right there. Jiyu widened her brown eyes to closely observe him, mentally preparing herself for the upcoming practical test. The little girl's slender hand slowly lifted, slightly curving her soft fingers as she reached forward. She carefully pressed her hand against the young master's firm neck, gently announcing that she would start counting the pulse right now. Under the unexpected touch, sweat lightly beaded on Hunter's forehead along with a flushed face. He was secretly panicked, not understanding what strange thing was happening to his body. The boy's large hand unconsciously tensed and gripped the edge of the mat, his mind completely bewildered as he wondered why his pulse was perfectly normal when he checked it himself. The ticklish feeling from the soft fingers spreading across his skin made his ears burn red. Even so, he told himself he couldn't simply swat her hand away, but had to strive to endure it for one more minute to save face. His limit of restraint seemed to break. Hunter couldn't hold it back any longer and suddenly parted his lips to let out a heavy breath. The young master, overwhelmed, abruptly turned his face the other way with a highly tense expression, leaving a clueless Jiyu to softly call his name. The little girl exclaimed in panic that his heart rate was accelerating too fast, confusedly stating that she had miscounted and didn't know what to do. Jiyu shyly withdrew her hand to apologize for the mishap and timidly suggested counting from the beginning again, making Hunter frown in annoyance as he turned away, silently cursing her name in helplessness. Jiyu embarrassedly blurted out an apology and softly suggested counting Hunter's pulse from the beginning again due to the incident that just happened. However, the teacher suddenly spoke up, asking the whole class to end the practice session, making the little girl's wish be extinguished halfway. Her fragile hands quickly left the other person's neck, creating a safe but highly disappointing distance. Hunter, with a face flushed red from shyness, loudly yelled at Jiyu to keep quiet and focus on finishing her notes. She nodded slightly and quietly picked up her pen to write in the notebook, trying to dispel the strange vibrations taking over her soul. Time flew by as the dry winter in New York gradually faded away to make room for the rainy early spring days. Frequent rains fell upon the city, bringing a damp breath and coloring the surrounding scenery with a somber tone. Entering her 9th grade year, Jiyu stood absent-mindedly looking at the thick curtain of rain and secretly guessed that there would soon be a huge downpour. Although the blue umbrella was a bit heavy, Jiyu secretly felt grateful to herself for bringing it along to withstand the weather. Every drop of rain fell incessantly onto the paved road, creating water ripples, opening up a quiet new chapter. Jiyu walked briskly under the white curtain of rain, secretly enjoying the pure scent of plants blending with the pleasant smell of damp earth. The sound of decisive footsteps stepping hard onto puddles created splashing water jets, breaking the surrounding quiet space. Hunter suddenly appeared and brushed past Jiyu without an umbrella, making her stunned by his abrupt appearance. A familiar scent suddenly hit her nose, making Jiyu freeze, secretly realizing it was the exact scent she had smelled earlier. Looking from behind, Hunter's back was completely soaked under the raindrops incessantly pouring down on the city. The young master's side profile appeared full of solemnity. He quietly walked in the rain as if immersed in his own thoughts. Jiyu secretly worried whether he felt cold or not, wearing only a thin shirt in this chilly early spring weather. She recalled Hunter's grumpy face when he complained that he always felt hot and annoyed whenever he saw her. The soaking wet sneakers suddenly halted right at the edge of the sidewalk, marking a mysterious stop right amid the passers-by. Jiyu stood absent-mindedly staring at his back, a supreme curiosity surging in her heart as to why he stopped so unexpectedly. Jiyu stopped in front of the traffic light that just turned red, secretly realizing she was standing right behind the familiar silhouette. She secretly felt it strange that a frequent rule breaker like Hunter was patiently waiting for the traffic light so unusually. Looking at the young master's rain-soaked back, Jiyu secretly felt sorry for the white shirt that was now completely clinging to his body. A sense of guilt surged seeing an acquaintance getting wet, making her wonder if staying silent and not inviting him to share the umbrella was too cruel. Jiyu gently tightened her grip on the umbrella handle in extreme embarrassment, secretly having a premonition of an awkward atmosphere about to engulf them both. Right when the green light turned on, she decided to cast aside all hesitation to approach her childhood friend. Using all her courage, the little girl softly called out Hunter Hamilton's name amidst the pouring rain, making him pause in sheer astonishment. Hunter turned around with a sharp, cold look, running a hand through his wet hair, and abruptly asked her what on earth she wanted to say. Jiyu stood in a daze with eyes full of hesitation, secretly preparing herself mentally to make a groundbreaking offer. Looking at the increasingly heavy rain behind a passing taxi, she secretly used the excuse of them living in the same apartment building to invite him to share the umbrella on the way back. Jiyu hesitantly offered Hunter to share the umbrella amidst the white curtain of rain, while the young master still stood in silence, with a soaked body. Facing his deep, unpredictable gaze, she hurriedly clarified that she had no ulterior motives and he didn't need to feel pressured. Jiyu slightly bowed her head, hiding under the blue canopy, secretly regretting her abrupt invitation and fearing that Hunter would get angry at this bother. She decided to retreat and told him to just forget what she had just said, so she could quickly walk away. Suddenly, a large hand decisively grabbed the umbrella handle, stopping the little girl's intention to flee in just a single breath. Hunter closed the distance between them, creating an intimate contact that made Jiyu freeze before his stern face. Jiyu's heart seemed to stop beating for a moment. She could only look up at him in shock and utter a flustered question. In the cramped space under the umbrella, Hunter's sharp, deep blue eyes seemed to want to scorch all of Jiyu's final defenses. A taxi rushed by on the waterlogged road, but it seemed nothing could interrupt the highly dramatic atmosphere at this moment. Hunter quietly tightened his grip on Jiyu's hand holding the umbrella handle, officially establishing a fierce new bond between the two of them. A taxi sped past on the soaked road, making dirty water splash towards the sidewalk where both were standing. Hunter immediately pulled Jiyu close into his embrace to shield her, creating a surprisingly intimate contact that left the little girl unable to react in time. Amidst the white curtain of rain in New York, time seemed to freeze as both stood silently in an affectionate embrace. The young master cleared his throat slightly and quietly explained that getting a little wet from the rain was still better than getting stained by muddy water on the street. Jiyu stood in a daze looking up at him, secretly feeling her heart beating wildly because of this incredibly gentle protection. Hunter awkwardly avoided her gaze. He coldly announced that the traffic light had now officially changed. The green pedestrian light started blinking, opening a path through the endlessly pouring rain. He decisively ordered Jiyu to quickly walk on to break the awkward atmosphere engulfing them both. Hunter led the way and completely tilted the blue umbrella towards the little girl, ignoring the fact that he was gradually getting soaked by the raindrops. Jiyu quietly observed from behind and secretly felt bad when she realized Hunter's shoulder was completely drenched from his effort to shield her. Jiyu looked up at the tall figure beside her, secretly thinking there was still quite a lot of empty space on her side under the blue umbrella. She timidly reached out her tiny hand intending to grasp the umbrella handle to help Hunter share the weight, but then hesitated and stopped. Hunter still kept a calm face. He quietly held the umbrella to shield both of them, regardless of his shoulder gradually getting wet from the rain. Looking at his stern side profile, Jiyu suddenly remembered the image of the naughty little boy who used to climb monkey bars and act on his whims back in the day. This silent care made her feel stunned, secretly admitting she couldn't believe Hunter could be so kind at times. Jiyu softly spoke up to ask the reason he didn't bring an umbrella, only to receive a completely nonchalant answer that he found it too much of a hassle. They walked silently amidst the white curtain of rain. The cramped space under the umbrella seemed to be pulling the distance between their two hearts closer. She sneaked a glance at her childhood friend, her mind besieged by an important question, but she just didn't know how to properly bring it up. Jiyu suddenly stopped when she realized Hunter had his eyes glued to her. She confusedly asked why he was looking at her like that. Hunter indifferently denied it and said that it was Jiyu who looked like she had something to say, making her secretly terrified at being read like a book by him. Jiyu secretly remembered the Hunter she used to know, the guy who would rather run for his life in the rain than share a tiny umbrella with anyone. Yet today, he was strolling along so leisurely, despite his body being completely drenched under the torrential raindrops incessantly pouring down. She briefly wondered if he was intentionally waiting so they could go home together, but then hurriedly denied it, thinking that it was impossible. Jiyu secretly feared he would mock her if she asked directly, so she decided to find another topic to break this silence. Hunter unexpectedly spoke up, bringing up the upcoming spring festival and asking whether she planned to attend that special event or not. He explained that it was a formal dance party, then suddenly quickened his pace, making Jiyu struggle to keep up with his rapid strides on the road. The young master's deep blue eyes suddenly became profound and full of sorrow, as if hiding an indescribable feeling in his heart. Jiyu confided that she had never attended parties before because her best friend's parents forbade it and secretly thought someone like Hunter probably wouldn't care much anyway. However, this time she affirmed she would try going with her best friend, then slightly looked up to probe what his intentions were regarding the party. Noticing Hunter's pace suddenly fluctuating, Jiyu was bewildered and secretly wondered why he reacted so weirdly when she mentioned the party. Hunter announced the formal dance would take place on Friday 2 weeks from now, while still engrossed in checking messages on his phone. Jiyu secretly thought about his packed tournament schedule, then suddenly paused upon hearing Hunter ask if she was also planning to attend. The young master kept walking and dropped an ambiguous reply that maybe he would show up, making the atmosphere even more mysterious. Jiyu secretly affirmed that in Hunter's world, the word maybe was actually a definite confirmation of his presence. The torrential raindrops continued to pound down on the massive architecture, opening a space full of quietness and melancholy. As soon as they stepped into the lobby, Hunter decisively requested Jiyu to stop by the treehouse with him for a moment. He revealed the upcoming, highly important U18 tournament, a major turning point compared to the youth-level competitions from before. Hunter emphasized the tournament's importance to college recruiters, making Jiyu secretly understand his worries. The little girl secretly mocked her own naivety and felt lucky for not asking those silly things earlier. Rainwater dripped down onto the floor. Hunter suggested he would wait, so Jiyu could quickly go change out of her soaked clothes. Jiyu quietly watched Hunter's back, secretly thinking that no matter how arrogant he was, he ultimately always needed her before every important match. She admitted feeling a strange satisfaction seeing the young Master Hamilton having to humble himself, while also fearing the pressure from his mother if she dared to ignore him. When both stopped in front of the treehouse, Hunter unexpectedly asked Jiyu to go up first, leaving the little girl dumbfounded at this change. Jiyu's footsteps slightly halted, secretly surprised because this was the first time he didn't rudely rush in first, but rather yielded to her so much. However, the rain-soaked surface made her shoes suddenly slip on the wooden floor, creating an unexpectedly dangerous situation. Jiyu barely had time to let out a startled cry upon feeling her body completely losing balance and about to plunge forward. Right in that fateful moment, Hunter's firm hand reached out like a natural reflex, ready to protect his childhood friend. Hunter decisively wrapped his arm tightly around Jiyu's waist from behind to keep her steady, creating an intimate contact that made the whole space seem to freeze. He grumpily demanded her to snap out of it, but almost blurted out calling Jiyu by the affectionate nickname Munchkin, usually reserved only for his little sister. Jiyu mumbled an apology for her carelessness due to the slippery rain, while Hunter quietly tightened his embrace and told her to stand still so he could support her. Jiyu hurriedly climbed the wooden stairs leading into the treehouse, despite Hunter's figure still silently watching her from behind. The young master stood motionless with a deeply thoughtful face. It seemed he was trying to suppress chaotic emotions that were on the verge of exploding. Stepping into the quiet space inside, both sat silently next to each other while Jiyu still couldn't help but feel awkward due to the excessively close contact. She timidly reached out to hold the hem of her skirt down, her mind besieged by the fear that she had exposed indiscreet moments while stepping up. Jiyu softly spoke up, observing that the kiss on the wrist was no longer exerting a strong effect like it did in the early days. Faced with her incredibly naive questioning, Hunter could only sigh and avoid her gaze, secretly blaming the other person's annoyingly oblivious nature. He crossed his arms highly arrogantly, coldly asserting that there was no spell or magic in this world that could last forever. The young master offered a highly subjective analysis that because he had overused the lucky energy from her, everything was now completely gone. Jiyu sweated in embarrassment when asked about the name of the psychology book. She secretly despaired because she couldn't reveal it was just a children's storybook. In a moment of thoughtless impulsivity, Jiyu suddenly suggested giving him a kiss in a different spot instead of his palm, making Hunter ask again in shock. Jiyu was stunned, scolding herself for how crazy she was to suggest kissing him in a different spot for good luck. Hunter pensively looked down at his wrist, secretly weighing the highly bold and unexpected offer from the little girl. The young master agreed, but set a condition that if this kiss was ineffective, Jiyu must tag along to cheer for him at the upcoming tournament. Jiyu could only tremblingly nod in agreement, immediately getting pulled close toward him by Hunter's strong hand. Their two hands intertwined, the warmth from the other's skin spreading, making the atmosphere in the wooden house suddenly turn hot. Jiyu gently placed a soft kiss on Hunter's wrist, feeling a strange vibration that made her too shy to look up. Hunter abruptly dropped a cold remark that maybe Jiyu Parker was no longer the lucky charm that could help him win. The raindrops still incessantly poured down on the lush green foliage, as if witnessing a highly silent and regretful end between the two of them. He glued his deep blue eyes to her, secretly concluding that high-level tournaments required something much more intense. Hunter decisively ordered Jiyu to try doing it in a different spot right this instant, leaving the little girl only able to stammer back in astonishment. Hunter fixed his sharp gaze intensely on Jiyu, creating a highly oppressive atmosphere right within the cramped space of the wooden house.